Good morning, everybody. Please tell the people who are at the line we're starting at 9 o'clock to make certain everybody has an opportunity to get in the seat. Good morning. Welcome to North Georgia. We're really glad that you were able to trek up through the rain and the thunderstorms and the traffic to come all the way up to the top of the mountain. I know that the local economy is very glad to see you here, and I personally am glad that we're getting a chance to see all of the best parts of our state. And you're going to find out a little bit more information later in the meeting today about what's happening with the local bar associations in the area. We have a treat this morning, and that our invocation is not going to be given by the chaplain at Young Harris College, but I've been able to work through a friend of mine to get the president of the college to come and give us the invitation. President Cox is, as you know, the current president of Young Harris College, but she's done a phenomenal job with expanding the footprint, the buildings, academic services, the demographics of the students, as well as the endowment of this college campus. And she has done a phenomenal job, and I'm very, very delighted that she's with us today. She is an attorney, for those of you who may have not been aware of that. She went to ABAC in Tifton, as well as got her degree from University of Georgia, and she received her law degree from Mercer University, where she was editor of the Law Journal at the time that she graduated. She has had a distinguished service of careers, different fields, different experiences, from everything from being a legislator to the Secretary of State, as well as you did something even before that in small town lawyer with her father, right? Small town, there's a lot, the legislature is following after your father's footsteps. But she is here to present us with the invocation. But I want you to know that, I think it was 3 weeks ago, she had experienced going back into the courtroom. Of course, she was providing assistance to Jim Butler in a trial that resulted in a verdict of $150 million. So she's a good lawyer. Would you join us, President Cox, and give us an ecumenical invocation, get us started off today? Thank you, Kathy.
Good morning, my friends of the bar, and welcome to my other hometown. We're glad to have you here in the Enchanted Valley. I appreciate your presence here in Young Harris and Towns County. As Madam President said, it was fun to be back in the courtroom after a few years down in my real hometown of Bainbridge, Georgia, earlier this month, where my Decatur County jury did deliver a nice little verdict. I don't think Decatur County had ever had a verdict over $1 million before this month, but it was a tragic accident and a very worthy verdict, we believe. But nice to be back in the courtroom because I've always been an active member of the bar, and I very much believe in what you are doing day in and day out as members of the bar. We are glad to have you in Towns County. This has been a busy week for us at Young Harris. Over the past week, over at our campus, on the campus of Young Harris College, we have hosted the president of the Guggenheim Foundation, nationally renowned poet Edward Hirsch. This past Wednesday night, we hosted the Consular Corps from Atlanta. All of the diplomats who have offices in Atlanta were on our campus for dinner. Yesterday, we had our Board of Trustees for the college for our annual meeting. So it's been a busy week with all kinds of activities as we wind up our calendar year. We have over 1,200 students now on our campus as we have transformed Young Harris from a 2-year college to a 4-year liberal arts college. We're headed to graduation here in another week and a half. Our commencement speakers are going to be James Carville and Mary Madeline. But let me tell you why, because it has nothing to do with my political background. It has something to do with Zell Miller, who you know lives across the street, but I bet some of you might know this. You might know that James Carville ran his campaign in 1990, but the real reason they're coming back here to do the commencement speech has to do with the fact that Zell married them in 1993. perform their wedding ceremony. So you can blame Zell for that kind of bizarre marriage that they have. But anyway, we're all looking forward to that. Should be an interesting commencement ceremony. So we're wrapping up a very exciting academic year, and hope as you drive by our campus on the way out, you might drive through our campus, because over the past 7 years that I've been here, we have constructed $100 million of new facilities, doubled our faculty, doubled our student enrollment, built 20 bachelor's degree programs, 21 minors. That's what I've been doing mostly over the last 7.5 years. So send us your students and friends and high school prospects. We'd love to have them. Anyway, we're glad to have you here, and I would ask you now to bow your heads in prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful day in this beautiful environment you have given us to shepherd and protect. Help us to be faithful stewards of the world around us. We thank you for the men and women here who have taken the road not traveled often. We thank you for the great gifts of intellect and wisdom you have bestowed on these men and women, and the paths that they have taken to serve you in a challenging world. Bless them with additional wisdom and vision to serve those who need serving. Help them to be mindful that for those you have given great gifts, much is expected of them. Guide them as they undertake planning and process this weekend, that you expect them to think of those, the least of these among us, and that the great challenge of all that you ask of us as members of the bar is to do justice, to seek mercy, and to walk humbly with you, our God. May we, as members of the bar, be the greatest examples of all of this great challenge. And it is in your name we ask that you give us the ability to serve you. In your name we pray. Amen. Have a great meeting.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate her squeezing this in her otherwise free schedule for the day. No, she has a whole lot of things. Thanks a lot, Mark and Kathy. All right, I'd like to recognize all of our former judges, presidents, and special guests whose names has been provided to me. And if I've missed somebody's name as I go through this list, let me know, and we'll try and make certain we give you the appropriate recognition. From the Supreme Court, I have seen Justice Thompson. He's sitting there in the middle. I have seen presiding judge, Justice Hines. I don't know there he is over there. And Justice Benham. Thank you, gentlemen, for getting up early in the morning and for manifesting a commitment and interest in what the State Bar does by coming all the way up here on a cold, dreary, rainy morning and participating in our meetings. From the Court of Appeals, Judge McFadden was here. There he is over there. And then Judge Will Ray, I also saw last night as well. Okay. Past presidents, we have a few. Bill Borick is here. Wait, was here last night? Donna said last night. Gerald Edenfield. He's not here. Still Huey, I did see him. Good morning. And we're in his neck of the woods. He's from Highland, North Carolina, right now. Great. Buck Ruffin, they have you on here even though you're still in office. But I want to acknowledge you. Ken Shigley is also here. I don't know if he's got up quite this, or there he is in the back. Is there any other past president here whose name I did not call? I really want to commend you guys now that I'm almost to the finish line of still coming back. Okay, y'all, that's fantastic. And then I don't think Attorney General Owens is here with us, but he had registered. I did not see Sam. All right, anybody else that I've omitted that should have been recognized? Thank you all for coming and supporting the bar. All right, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning. I want to ask everybody to look in the book beginning at page 5. Check your attendance roll and make sure we've got you correctly recorded as either present, absent, or excused. And if we don't, just let me know after the meeting. Now, let me make a comment about excused absences. I get to decide if your request for an excuse is good or not, and I've seen some pretty good ones. If you're in the middle of a trial, if you've had a death of a loved one, those are pretty good excuses, but some of them get close to being unexcused, like I just don't want to be there, or I've got to watch my favorite TV program Friday afternoon. So if you want an excuse, I've been pretty liberal about giving them, but think up something better than I just don't want to come to the meeting. We're going to pass the roll around, and the folks on the back row, if you're the last on your row to sign, if you will, just put the signed rolls up here next to the cameraman, and I'll get them after the meeting. Thank you.
We have several members of the board who have expressed a willingness after a long time of service or a short time of service to retire and to not seek reelection. We're going to recognize these people because, as you know, it's a tremendous amount of commitment of time and money to be a participant in this board, and we are tremendously appreciative of the sacrifices they've made to represent their circuits. So as I'm going to move down here because all of the awards and things I'm going to give them are down there, but they get plaques for people who served over 10 years and certificates of appreciation for those who've served less than 10 years. And I will call them forward, we'll take a picture, and we will probably put it in the Bar Journal as well. Give me a minute. Michelle Gardner is over here helping me with this. Thank you very much. Our first person is from the Alcovey Circuit, and it's Steve Hathorn. Hathorn, is he here? Hathorn. Thank you very much. Oh, hey, Steve. I know exactly who you are. My fellow member of the disciplinary. You're gonna get on this side. All right, I'm gonna let you come through. Good. That's all right.
Yeah, you know me.
I do know you. Just make sure I get the pronunciation right. Thank you, Steve Hathorn. And then Emily Blair. Is Emily with us? Blair? I don't think I didn't see him. All right. She will get her certificate as well. Randy Evans. He has a certificate for his service from the Atlanta Circuit. And Donald Gillis from the Dublin Circuit. Thank you very much for the time that you were here for a year. Turn around so she can get a picture of. We have to work on getting somebody in this circuit. All right. Brian McDaniel from the Southern Circuit. More than 10 years on the board. And we got Steve, had served 16 years on the board. So you know that's long time commitment. Is Brian here? All right. And Andrea McGee. I don't know if Dion McGee is here. We will make certain that she gets her certificate. That's it. I want to call your attention to the fact that all of you should have had a copy of a revised agenda on your seats when you came in today. It was emailed to you prior to the meeting, but I want to make certain that everybody has one. We moved some action, or removed an action item to a discussion item. We will be discussing the topic of the incubator and giving about 20 minutes of time to discuss, me to present the information in detail and to address some questions. In addition, after this meeting concludes, Bucky Askew and myself will be available to discuss questions with regard to the incubator in this very room. We'll probably be over the side somewhere, but we'll be here. Now that you've had a chance to look at the agenda as presented to you today, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, nay. All right, we will proceed with the agenda that was presented today. I want to call to your attention on pages 12 through 13, the future meeting schedule, most of which reflect the meetings of Bob, and I think they're all complete now, so please put them on your calendars. We have one consent agenda matter, and that is approval of the minutes from our 255th meeting that was held in January. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as presented? It's been moved and properly seconded. Are there any other, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda minutes have been approved. I'd like to call forward to the front podium Thomas Worthy, and I would love for you all to give him an absolute standing ovation for what he has done this legislative cycle. He's going to provide you the details, but trust me, he's earned it.
Please sit down. I am pleased to report that the State Bar had a very, very good session in a environment otherwise completely consumed by the transportation debate. The transportation bill sucked all the oxygen out of the room, all the passion out of the legislative session. Time and effort and money was spent negotiating and hammering out that deal, which they ultimately did pass. The iteration of the transportation bill that did pass raises $900 million over annually by removing all the sales tax on gasoline and imposing an excise tax of 26 cents per gallon on gasoline, 29 cents per gallon on diesel. It removes tax credits for jet fuel and electric vehicles and adds a $5 per day hotel motel tax. So that deal took just about all 40 days to get hammered out. It's a good thing for the infrastructure of the state, but that is what everybody pretty much focused their time on. I am pleased to report that our biggest agenda item did get passed, and it was very impressive to get that passed because it was money in the form of new appropriations, and we were able to secure that with the help of our judicial colleagues, even in the climate where they were raising $900 million annually on transportation. And that was the pay increases. So HB 279 did pass. It gives a 5% across-the-board pay raise for all Superior Court, Appellate Court judges, district attorneys, and circuit public defenders. In addition to that 5% across-the-board pay raise, it gives an additional $6,000 annual supplement to the Superior Court judges, district attorneys, and CPDs in any circuit where at least one accountability court operates. In circuits where accountability court at least one accountability court operates, you're looking at really closer to a 10% pay raise for the Superior Court judges, district attorneys, and CPDs. It adds a per diem provision for Court of Appeals and Supreme Court justices, Court of Appeal judges who reside more than 50 miles away from the state judicial building, and it gives them 30 per diem days per term of court, and it adds a new 3-judge panel to the Court of Appeals. So this was an omnibus judiciary bill. It was probably the biggest judiciary reform and judiciary funding bill that's taken place in probably 25 years. And it was, we were very pleased to see that obtain passage. Other funding issues on the State Bar that we were successful on, we got an additional $193,126 of new state appropriations for grants to Georgia Legal Services for legal representation of victims of domestic violence. We are now at $2.3 million on our way back up to $2.5 million, which is the pre-recession funding level. So we're very pleased as how we are stepping up very significantly each year to get that funding level back to pre-recession levels. And then the General Assembly also fully funded, as they generally always do, the Georgia Appellate Resource Center. After 5 years of effort by the State Bar and the Georgia Real Estate Closing Association, Closing Attorneys Association, I'm pleased to report that HB 153 passed. That creates a new private cause of action for consumers harmed by the unauthorized practice of law in residential real estate settings. And it also codifies the Supreme Court's opinion that only licensed members of the Georgia Bar in good standing can close loans. This year, this year's installment of criminal justice reform and reinvestment that the Bar has been a major stakeholder on, this year's installment contained 3 bills. HB 310 improved the transparency and fairness in the misdemeanor probation system. HB 328 reformed some adult sentencing, contained some adult sentencing and parole eligibility reform. And HB 361 carried the juvenile justice reform piece. And those, all 3 of those passed unanimously or near unanimous from both chambers. We do have some outstanding issues. HB 531, the State Bar's long arm statute reform. It did not get out of Senate rules in time for the 40th day. It will go back to Senate Judiciary and will have to be passed by the Senate. It will not have to go back to the House at this time because the Senate has not, and we have no indication that they will change it. That was one of the instances, as we always see, that the clock just ran out. SB 128, which was the Corporations Code revision, that actually passed both chambers, but a transmittal glitch and how they plugged it into the computer in the Senate, it really needed to be called up on adopting a House amendment, but they pulled it up as a agree, disagree. So that was a transmittal glitch. So it's not sitting on the governor's desk, but it's still sitting in the Senate so that when they come back into session next January, it will be a simple agree, disagree, and will go straight to the governor's desk probably on day 1 or day 2. The real property water lien bill is introduced, but still pending. The family law section's antenuptial agreements bill is introduced and still pending. The Attorneys for Rural Areas Assistance Act is introduced, and we have a very passionate sponsor that is in support of that bill. But this year, he wanted to make sure the focus on any new appropriations for the legal profession really went to the judges, CPDs, and DAs. We had 3 uniform law bills that were introduced or that were proposed, some of which were introduced. The Uniform Access to Fiduciary, or the Uniform Access to Digital Assets Act. The fiduciary section has asked us to pull back on that because the carriers, meaning Verizon and AT&T, most of the people that hold these digital assets, they're working to reach some consensus at the national level because other states that sought to introduce that bill this session ran into a bit of a problem with the carriers, so they're working on that at the national level. And there were 2 uniform bills proposed by the International Trade and Legal Services that really kind of assist the international arbitration efforts that are still pending and will go in the omnibus uniform law bill that was introduced this year but did not secure passage. Happy to go over some other big non-law issues that the General Assembly took up. If you have any questions, but I would like to close to talk a little bit first about our grassroots effort. We're really improving on that, and as all of you know, as a learned profession, we have not been very good at that. You know, the doctors, the dentists, the accountants have historically mobilized their grassroots a lot more than the legal profession, but we're working tirelessly to change that. I believe many of you signed up for the new online advocacy portal, the State Bar Action Network. We've had very good feedback on that. We hosted multiple lobby days at the Capitol. The Savannah Bar Association joined us, the Rockdale, Henry, and Newton County Bar Associations, and the Georgia Asian Pacific American Bar Association all joined the legislative team at the Capitol for a day. I highly encourage you to ask your local and voluntary bar associations to come up there and do that when they have time, because it matters a great deal, and members like to see their constituents. So on behalf of Rusty and Roy, who are here, we thank you for the honor of allowing us to represent this organization, and all three of us are available for any questions you may have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Ward? Rusty and Roy, please come forward. We're missing one member of the team, which is Meredith. But you all need to know who's working on your behalf down at the Capitol. They have done a phenomenal job, and I'm going to tell you, this is the first time the bar had 13 bills at a time going up to the legislature for consideration. It's a very contentious group of people. It could be a little trying on everybody's time. But these folks, Rusty is the kind of the captain of the legislative lobbyist team, and Roy Robinson, and then Meredith Weaver, who is not able to be with us today, have worked with Thomas coordinating them this year to make certain that we've had the success we had. And I just think they need a round of applause as well. Thank you very much for what you do. And I also want to make mention of one thing. Yesterday was Thomas's birthday. He decided to spend it with us. So thank you very happy birthday, Thomas. I also needed to give credit to a couple of other folks who are not here today, but the chair of our ACL committee was Don Jones, and the members of that committee, would you please stand if you're in attendance today? The members of the Advisory Committee on Legislation. There's a couple of folks here. Give them a hand, because they sat there for hours going through all these legislative proposals, and I think we did a pretty good job with getting consensus on the matters that we proceeded with in the legislative cycle. All right, we're moving forward to our board action items, and if you have the corrected agenda before you, you know that what the first proposal is, a proposal for approval of changes to the investment policy. I need to make just one statement, and y'all can hopefully remember it for the whole group of action items. These action items are recommendations that are coming to you for approval from the executive committee. Because they come from a committee, you do not need a second. There's generally a motion to approve. Committee recommendations don't require seconds. So we'll see how we work through this with that disclosure. Okay. The investment policy provisions were basically to change our current policy from being just a little too rigid to even generate any interest on your earnings. And so I impaneled a group of people who were stellar financial people, investment people. We had a phenomenal committee, and their report is on pages 29 to 41. Thank you. And this was a unanimous recommendation from the people in the committee. The proposal started from the CFO, and it was reviewed by people from the General Counsel for SunTrust, an attorney from Ing, Elena Kaplan. Nancy, were you on there too? I thought she was on there too. There were a lot of us there in attendance, and then the people also reviewed the various drafts of the proposals were circulated, between the groups. So there was no division amongst these experts about the changes. But if you have any questions regarding it, please let me know. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the changes proposed to the investment policy. All right, yeah, good. They got it. Nobody seconded it. Wonderful. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, we got one eye opposed. The ProHac Vice fees are the changes to that particular section or rules. It's reflected on pages 42 to 43. These recommendations came from the Office of General Counsel because really there's a glitch in the fact that we established a $275 filing fee for all of the people who, an increase to $275 for the filing fee for people who wanted to obtain ProHack Viche emission, and we forgot to include it on a recurring basis because some people keep coming back and back and back, and we didn't contemplate that. So the request was from the Office of General Counsel that we make the modification that just allows us to collect it every time they apply it for renewal. If they do a renewal, it's the same fee. And so the Executive Committee has approved this and recommends it to the board. I'd entertain a motion to approve this as presented. Okay. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, say nay. All right, ayes have it. The next one is a request for changing in our client security fund, and I'm gonna have Darrell come forth and explain that to you as he's the Executive Committee liaison to this committee.
Good morning. Welcome to the house that Zell Miller built. In September, the Client Security Fund brought to the attention of the Executive Committee a problem that they foresaw, which was a reduction in the corpus of the Client Security Fund brought about by two occurrences. Number one, a reduction in the interest income on that corpus, and number two, a reduction caused by several very large pending claims before the Client Security Fund, which when paid would result in a further reduction in the corpus of the Client Security Fund. And so they brought that to our attention with a recommendation that the Executive Committee take action to prevent that reduction, primarily for two reasons. Number one, to ensure that all claims pending before the Client Security Fund could be paid. And number two, and probably more importantly to this board, to avoid a reduction in that fund below $1 million, which would trigger an automatic assessment against all members of the bar. And you can imagine the pitchforks and torches that would result if there were an automatic assessment due to a reduction in that fund. And so President Perkins Hooker appointed a task force to look into this issue that I headed, and in conjunction with Vince Clanton and Paul Threlkeld, who are the co-chairs of the Client Security Fund. A recommendation was made by the Client Security Fund to the task force to change Bar Rule 10-103 to increase the annual claims paid cap from $350,000 to $500,000 to allow the fund to adequately address all the claims that are pending against it. They also proposed an $8 to $10 assessment against members of the bar to increase the corpus of the fund so as to prevent a reduction in the fund below the $1 million. After studying that and looking into it with the assistance of Rita and Bill Neesmith from the Office of General Counsel, the task force made a recommendation to the Executive Committee in January that we indeed increase the cap from $350,000 to $500,000, and that we take $500,000 from the unrestricted bar surplus to bolster the fund and to avoid an assessment against the members of the bar to do so. And so in January, at our meeting in January, the Executive Committee unanimously approved a recommendation to this board to both change Bar Rule 10-103 to increase the cap from $350,000 to $500,000 and to take $500,000 from the unrestricted bar surplus to bolster the fund. And that is the proposal and recommendation before the board today. I want to, before we vote on that, I'd like to make one comment. Too often, both in this organization and elsewhere, people who run a committee or run a portion of an organization react rather than foresee and prospectively act. And I think Vince and Paul deserve a round of applause for having the foresight to see a problem coming and to act on it before it actually became a problem, rather than waiting for it to be a problem and then having to address it.
Does anybody have any questions for Darrell or Vince? Yes, sir, Ms. Davis, get up to that microphone. Get over to that microphone. It's right next to you.
I just want to say I've had the pleasure of serving on this committee for two and a half years, and it's been a very eye-opening experience to me. As my wife says, I've lived a very sheltered professional life, and I've learned what some lawyers have done to their clients, which is truly tragic, and it's a huge negative. But on the positive side, I compliment the State Bar and the committee for having this program. Some of these clients have said they're shocked that the lawyers do this for the public, and that funds, unfortunately very limited relatively, are there. But I just want to recognize Vince Clanton. He is the heart and soul of this committee. He's worked very hard. He's as wise as he is gracious, and he has really kept us on track and particularly had the foresight for this issue. And one of his key strengths is an area where my observation is many lawyers are weak, especially in their personal lives. He understands money, and he doesn't go through life blowing it. So I would like everyone to give Vince a round of applause for that.
Thank you. Great. All right, if there are no other questions about the actual changes, I'd entertain a motion, since this came from the Executive Committee, to approve the recommendations of the Client Security Task Force. All right, and is there any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much. It passes. Thank you very much, Vince. You and Paul. All right, the next item that requires our consideration comes from the Civil Legal Services Task Force as part of the recommendations of that committee. And Rita Sheff has been heading that committee, and she will provide an explanation of the matters that are before you for a vote.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam President. Just as a refresher, this task force was created last year under President Ruffin's presidency to explore options and make recommendations to the Executive Committee and to this board for securing reliable and adequate funding for civil legal services in Georgia. And we will be providing you with a final report on the task force at the annual meeting in June. But before I get to the action items, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight two recent successes for all of you. I think you may remember at this meeting a year ago, this board approved amendments to the IOLTA rule to provide for rate comparability. And after that was published in the Bar Journal and that was filed with the Supreme Court, just this past week, just several days ago, our Supreme Court issued an order approving that rule that we filed last year. And so effective January 1 of 2016, the rules will go into effect, and we will now have rate comparability in Georgia. In the short term, that will not have a significant impact on the money that's going into IOLTA, but over time, as we all hope that the interest rates rise back to levels where they were at some point in time, that could mean as much as an additional $2 to $2.5 million that would go into the IOLTA account. So we're very appreciative of your support for that, and also of the Supreme Court in issuing that order this week. The second highlight is that you also will remember that we pursued a series of amendments to the Pro Hac Vice rules and expanding that and providing that those funds then go into supporting civil legal services. And I can report to you that in the first 6 months since those rules have been in effect, a total of about $175,000 has gone into the Georgia Bar Foundation, again, for civil legal services. So we've had two good successes in the first year and a half or so of the task force. Today you have two items, you have two action items and actually one information item on your agenda, and these are on pages 47 to 61 of your board book, if you want to follow along. The first one relates to county law library funds, and OCGA 3615.7 provides for funding of county law libraries through a filing fee add-on. And interestingly, that statute expressly provides that in the event the Board of Trustees determines in its discretion that it has excess funds, such funds as may be designated by the Board of Trustees shall be granted to charitable tax-exempt organizations which provide civil legal representation for low-income people. So the task force has prepared a sample educational piece that we can tailor to each county in Georgia that has a law library fund and that has a board to use excess funds for civil legal services. That draft educational piece is in your materials, and the Executive Committee has approved the draft and the concept and presents it today as a recommendation that we use that to assist in seeking excess county law library funds for civil legal services in Georgia. So with that as a committee recommendation, I believe, Madam President, that does not require a second.
They're working with me on this. We have a joke, internal joke going on up here about this second step. All right, anyone have any I'll entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of the committee. Does anyone have any discussion on the proposed recommendations? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, indicate by saying nay. Okay.
Great, thank you. The second action item relates to residual Cypre awards and urging their use for civil legal services. And similarly, the task force prepared a short educational piece and a couple of sample orders, which are in your materials, summarizing why we believe that that's appropriate to use residual Cypre funds for civil legal services. This has been done by state and federal courts in Georgia, as well as courts around the country. And although those awards are not as predictable in terms of timing and amount, they can result in substantial funds. So the task force would like to use the summary that we've prepared, as we may revise it, to update with additional legal authority and distribute that to state and federal trial courts in Georgia, as well as the plaintiff and defense bar, in urging them to consider civil legal services when they designate entities to receive Cypre awards. And so this, again, has been taken from the task force to the executive committee, and the executive committee has approved this, and it's presented to you today for your consideration.
Is there a motion to accept the portion of the Cypre proposal from the committee? All right, is there any discussion, questions? Hearing, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, members of the board. I mentioned there's also one information item that's coming from the task force, and that is as follows. This also relates to the Cypre issue, and we have discussed among the task force, and again, the executive committee has considered this, approaching the Supreme Court and asking the Supreme Court to direct that the state trial courts in Georgia, when they have residual Cypre awards, that they designate a minimum of 25% of those residual Cypre funds for civil legal services. And then they would have discretion above that amount to designate more as they might deem appropriate. This type of rule has been used in a number of other states, and we're going to do some further work on this and create the actual proposed rule for you before the June meeting. So I anticipate that this will come back as an action item at our annual meeting in June. But just to give you an idea of what we're considering, there's one of the rules that we're thinking about modeling comes out of Washington State, and it would it reads as follows. Any order entering a judgment or approving a proposed compromise of a class action certified under this rule that establishes a process for identifying and compensating members of the class shall provide for the disbursement of any residual funds. In matters where the claims process has been exhausted and residual funds remain, not less than 25% of the residual funds shall be dispersed to the Legal Foundation of Washington to support activities and programs that promote access to the civil justice system for low-income residents of Washington State. The court may disperse the balance of any residual funds beyond the minimum percentage to the Legal Foundation of Washington or to any other entity for purposes that have a direct or indirect relationship to the objectives of the underlying litigation or otherwise promote the substantive or procedural interests of members of the class. So that's just one of several proposed several rules that are used around the country that we're considering for here in Georgia. And as said, we'll be analyzing that further, and we'll provide you with the language that we propose and the process for that rule prior to the meeting this summer. I do want to note that on a parallel track with this, the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education also has a proposal that it plans to present to the Supreme Court of Georgia, asking that 25% of residual Cypre monies would be used for judicial education. And at the ICJE Board of Trustees meeting yesterday, that board approved that recommendation. And we have been in communication with the folks who are working on that for ICJE, and will coordinate and cooperate with them as these two parallel tracks move forward. And we would anticipate that they would probably be presented to the court in the same time frame. And none of us see any conflict between those two things. In fact, I think they're both appropriate uses of Cypre monies that could definitely benefit both civil legal services and judicial education in Georgia. So that, as I said, is an information item only. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to discuss them with you prior to the annual meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Don't go too far. As the treasurer and the president, we get a chance to both take all the hits for the dues recommendations and explanations of the same for the board for next year. These recommendations are approved by the executive committee. They came from the finance committee. I don't know if Nancy's here. Okay, the chair for the finance committee would also be available for questions, but I'm going to let Rita go ahead and present them because I really don't think we have any issues with regard to the matters before you.
Thank you. Well, this is the time of year that the Finance Committee is in the process of evaluating where we are on the budget for the year and preparing the proposed budget for the next year. And as you know, at our annual meeting, you'll be asked to approve the budget for the next fiscal year. But one step in that process is to approve the dues and the dues statement for the year going forward. And after very careful consideration, I think everyone will recall that we've had 2 years in a row where we had $4 dues increases each year. This year, the Finance Committee and the Executive Committee have recommended that we have no dues increase this year. And so hopefully that will meet with your approval today, and that will be the first item that we'll take up, and that would be that dues for active members would remain at $248, and dues for inactive members would be $124. And then just as a reminder, last year we approved that new members would have their dues prorated based on when they joined the bar during the year.
This has got one thing that's missing from here, and that is that there's a caveat that the no dues increase includes indexing for a program, and if I could get which one? The contract attorney for free arbitration. We are going back and systemically trying to to index and absorb officially all of these programs that kind of went through without coming through with any dues increase. We have enough surplus to take care of that program as well as not at the regular operations without doing any dues increase. But the actual vote from the committee was to propose no dues increase with the recognition of the records that we have indexed for the law fee arbitration, law assistance, or is it law review panel? Which one? Fee arbitration. So I just want to make certain that that's correctly presented to you. I entertain a motion to not change dues for next year? All right, everybody on record for that one. Okay, it came from a committee, so we don't need a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All right, Mrs. Jeffrey.
Thank you very much. I didn't think there was going to be too much objection to that this morning. The second item that relates to the dues and the dues statement is set out on your agenda on pages 2 and 3. There's a number of items that relate to the bar dues statement. I'm just going to go through them quickly, and I hope there are no questions, but if you do, we're happy to answer them. Those are the section dues, and those range from $10 to $35 per section. Those are opt-in, obviously, for whatever section that you're interested in, and that's no change over last year. The second relates to 2 required assessments for the bar, the first being the Client Security Fund, and you heard about that a little while ago. The Client Security Fund, as you know, each new lawyer pays $100 spread over 4 years at $25 a year. That's the same as last year. There's also an assessment for the Bar Center, which is $200 total at $50 per year over 4 years. And again, that's the same as last year. Then there also are 2 voluntary contributions that appear on the dues statement. The first is for the Legislative and Public Education Fund, and you heard about our great successes in that area earlier from Thomas Worthy. That is a $100 opt-out, and that's no change for a number of years, as indicated on your agenda. The second is for Georgia Legal Services Program, and this involves an opt-in contribution. This year, the recommendation from Georgia Legal Services is that it be a $300 opt-in suggested individual contribution, and that is up $50 from the $250 suggested donation last year. New this year is a $100 opt-in suggested contribution for YLD members or younger lawyers. And so with those are the items that appear on would appear on the dues statement for which we request your approval.
I'd entertain a motion to accept the proposed, language to go on our dues statements. I need a second. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Help me out here. Any discussion? I know you did. All right, seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the proposed recommended language for the due statement, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed indicate by saying nay. All right, the ayes have it. And I think we have the last matter, Ms. Sheffy, is your annual audit, the approval of it.
Yeah, this is my last item for a little while, and then I'll sit down and enjoy the rest of the meeting. And that is approval of the 2013 to 2014 annual audit. And this appears in your board book, pages 63 to 97. You have there the audited financial statements, as well as slides from the audit committee meeting that was held recently regarding the audit of the State Bar, including its related entity, the Commission on Continuing Lawyer Competency. I won't go through any of it in detail. I'll just say that the audits were clean. There were no exceptions, and it's a testament to our excellent fiscal management by staff, by all of the staff, but specifically by Steve Lane, our Chief Financial Officer, and his staff, as well as our Executive Director, Jeff Davis, and Sharon Bryant, our Chief Operating Officer. They all do a fabulous job with the bar. And so I hope that you've had a chance to read the audited financials and the information that's in your book. But it's, again, the usual excellent report, and so I'm happy to be able to provide that to you today.
This matter is being presented to the board to formally approve the audit report. It will be reflected on our website for all of our members after your approval. Can I get a motion to approve approve acceptance of the audit report? All right. All in favor, any discussion? Excuse me. All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed indicate by saying nay. All right, we will post that audit report probably no later than Mondays, so everyone can have access to it. Now, in the informational report section we're going to move to, I'm going to go ahead and take a little liberty since I have both A and B. I'm going to do my president's report because it's briefer, and then I want to allow us the time to go through presenting the details with regard to the incubation program. All right, so I have many fewer slides for this report. I basically wanted to summarize some of the information that you have detailed on your report in your board book on pages, I guess it's 98 through 106. And I thought about doing it in a way that allows you to see it graphically. This is a pie chart of the activity that's summarized by months, by days in that book. And the 54%, which is a large area here, I'm sitting there trying to work her pointer. This 54% is spent on attending committee meetings at the bar, all of the numerous committees and meetings that I am either part of or have been attending because I'm interested in. I'm not a part of the task force, but I've been attending civil services task force meetings as well as any of the section meetings that have involved issues that we had before us, specifically UPL being one of those. The 25% of the time is spent on this one right here. 25% of the time is spent on Georgia Bar Association speeches and activities. So I have been doing a lot of traveling throughout the state, and many of you have seen me at your local locale. Some of them say, yeah, we've been there. Every time I have been asked, I've shown up. Every time I've been asked, I've shown up. And that's because I believe that one of the agenda items I had was to make the bar relevant to people in their communities, not just an icon somewhere that just kind of exists in some Ethernet somewhere. Oh, there's the State Bar of Georgia. I've been actually there. And I'll have a slide of those places that I've been a little later. And I've had a little help from some people in this audience making those meetings, and I thank you, Pilot Davis, for doing that. I'm having a problem with my color schedule here, but the next one is a 9%, which is this purple on my color, on my sheet. And this purple was for attending committee activities that didn't relate to necessarily the bar, but they relate to other entities that are supportive of, related to, or affiliated to the bar. Then I've also gone to speak at national, this little 6% national and other state bar meetings. I have been to North Carolina, to the Virgin Islands, to Texas, to Massachusetts, all over, attending meetings on your behalf as the president of the bar. And then I've also spent time, the remaining 2 items of 3% are going to law schools as their speaker at their events or supportive of public interest activities. And the other 3% is I've gone to schools, high schools, colleges that are not law schools, and spoken to them with regard to law, ethics, and any type of legal-related topics. These are some summaries of where I am on the programs, the 3 initiatives that I told you about last June. The Rural Lawyer Assistance Program grew out of my desire to try to make certain that we didn't have 6 counties in Georgia without lawyers. Well, we no longer have 6, but we don't have the outcome I want. We're still working on that. And that is, we have 1 lawyer who's been discovered in Clay County, so he is now operating 1 day a week. So at least bringing attention to the issue has resulted in some people changing the way in which they practice. We also put into place all of the tools we need to solve this problem, with the exception of approval from the legislature for it. We've spoken to the governor, have his support. We've spoken to the commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs, have her support. We have done everything we can do to put into place this program, with the exception of being in a year where we were trying to get funding for judicial salaries and getting caught up in that fight and making that our priority rather than this. However, the programs are teed up to go forward. Bob is committed to try to bring this matter again forward, and I will be working on its behalf until we get it concluded. But we have all of the support from the counties, and we're going to just keep working with that. And I really do appreciate, is Thomas still in here? I appreciate the sponsor of the bill, which I think is a Mr. Fleming. You might know. Alex Atwood from Brunswick, who is a very, very active supporter, and he has committed to us to get this done next year when we're not dealing with the fights over other monies for lawyers. The iCivics program was a program that I proposed to you, and the executive committee has been very, very supportive of with regard to outreach efforts for the next generation. And this is reaching out to middle school and high school students. We did a very successful launch of our pilot program in the 5 counties that we indicated that we did the training for, and we paired them up with the assistance of the YLD with actual lawyers who came into the classroom to serve as resources for the teachers. Next, we're moving to Clark. Actually, we have dates we are setting up training for: Clark County, Hall County, Richmond, and Fulton counties. We're working with Gwinnett and DeKalb County school programs to see if we can get the training for the program incorporated into their regular teacher training days. And they take place between May and August every year. That's how we leverage the monies to reach the most students. As we go to the teacher training day, we pay for the coordinator who trains those teachers at that day on the use of the iCivics program. That teacher goes back to her classroom. We assign a lawyer to her once she's been trained, and we reach out to thousands of students. So the program has been growing. There's a lot of support for it. So much so, I went to speak to the state school superintendent, who wholeheartedly supported it, gave me a link on his website, and invited me to his statewide social studies training day in October. I want to commend Deborah Crater, who works for State Bar as the coordinator of our law-related education programs. This program is being housed under there, even though myself, Evelyn Davis, Shariki Cavett, as co-chairs. Evelyn is the chair, Shariki is the vice chair of the iCivics committee. They have done a phenomenal job, and we are all working mightily with people throughout the state. We have a local coordinator in Columbus, a local one in Savannah, and we are really trying our best to make preparations for the next generation to understand why you need 3 branches of government, how you get a bill passed, and why you need to vote. The other third component of my program was to try to make certain that we reached out to all members to make the bar relevant, to try to get engaged, let them know, everybody know that this is their bar, and we wanted their participation. We've done a phenomenal job with communications in this regard, and if those of you who haven't seen a story about the bar, raise your hand. Right. It's everywhere. We've been covering Dixie like the do, is the old adage with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Those of you who are old enough to know that. North Georgia, South Georgia, and even national papers have picked up activities about our lawyers and what is happening down here. We've had historic milestones to celebrate. We've had not only the first African-American president of the bar, but we have had the first Asian-American judge elected in a non-metro area, and the first Hispanic attorney appointed in a non-metro county. Phenomenal year, and people needed to know that. In addition to that, we've had a lot of good news. Y'all have been really great this year. I wish I could have, planned the fact of how good you all were going to be, but I have promoted each and every act that's come across my desk, and so all of you have seen notices, letters, articles to the editor, and press coverage to the extent that we could leverage it everywhere throughout the state, and I want to commend you for giving me the material to work with, because I didn't make it up. The facts are you all have done a phenomenal job. But I have also, in this part of this umbrella of outreach and community, kind of improvement, enhancement of the respectability and the purpose of the bar, gone out to the bar associations throughout the state, and it is making a difference in two different ways, and I was surprised by the second way. It's making a difference in how the public feels, because the public is saying, gee, I didn't know that was happening. And they now know who the State Bar is. It's a name of an entity that regulates lawyers, when they didn't know that. And then the other thing that's making a difference is that the local bar associations are feeling more connected to the bar, and I didn't expect that. But here's a list, and you cannot see, of all of these bar associations I visited. And these are bars that we have worked with throughout the years, but we don't always get a chance to get to them or let you know we're going to them. Could be a combination of both. Augusta, Valdosta, North Carolina's annual meeting, I was there for the swearing in of their president. Macon, the National Bar Association's annual meeting was held in Atlanta, and we hosted them at the State Bar. The Tifton Bar Association, I attended the American Bar Association's annual and mid-year meeting. The Atlanta Bar Association, we've attended the major events that they've had and celebrations. Savannah Bar Association, Gate City Bar Association, Columbus and Fountain City Bar Associations, Gabois Bar Association, DeKalb County Lawyers Association, Henry County Bar Association, North Fulton Bar Association, Gwinnett Bar Association, Clayton County Bar Association, Sandy Springs Bar Association. These are places that I actually spoke, presented, did a seminar on. But in addition to that, I've also attended numerous sections, as well as just an event, an activity twice, really, at Cobb County. But I did not have an opportunity to speak. You see what I mean? This makes the difference, going out there to where our members are in their communities and trying to make a difference. So that summarizes what's in those pages, but it gives you, the information in the board book gives you the details about the dates. But I just thought you need to know what was being done on behalf of your bar. I also want to make mention of a couple of things in my section. Forgot that. There's some major programs that we have coming up that we wanted to call to your attention as early as possible. One is we're having a celebration of the civil rights milestones, including the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voting Rights Act, and the March on Selma, at a day-long symposium or activity day, not a symposium, I like this, it sounds a little stodgy, on June 3rd. We're having a combination of CLE presentation from 3 to 5, outreach to the local students to come in and then get engaged in that, as well as lawyers. And then we have a really outstanding, stellar panel of former civil rights activists, they're all older people now, who will be in the afternoon for that activity, a panel discussion. And then we are having an evening where we're celebrating Georgia lawyers who were in the trenches in the 60s and the 50s. There were a few African American, there's a few other lawyers who were involved in this, and we're going to recognize them at the celebration. So we're working in conjunction with the Center for Civil and Human Rights, who's been a fantastic partner with regard to this, and we've entered into a contract for them to assist us, and they've done an outstanding job. In addition to that activity date of June 3rd, I also want you to mark May 29th. It's a symposium we're doing on military legal services. As you know, our bar has been a leader in several ways to start new and inventive programs. And one of these programs, under the leadership or really push for a couple of terms of Jeff Bramlett, was the creation of our Military Veterans Committee. And I want you to know this is a nationally esteemed program. Norman Zoller is over here as our executive director, and Norman has taken this project on as a mission, and it's so well regarded that states are coming on the 29th of May to find out how we did it. We have 12 states, bar associations confirmed to come and talk to us about our military legal services program and how you can make a difference to the veterans who are in your particular states. And so that's going to be a really interesting symposium. Those of you who have not been involved in that program before need to come and just see about it. Sometimes we take for granted some of the great things we're doing, and I want you to know this is one of them. All right, any questions about any of that information I presented to you on the President's Report? All right. You got the other one? Sarah? I'm going to move into information on the incubator program. Now, this was a change on your agenda because one of the things I didn't take in full consideration is we had not fully briefed the board about the operation of the incubator. And I have my leader that I'm following with this on this program, Bucky Askew here, who's also here to provide some responses to questions and correct me if I get any of the details wrong. But as again, Bucky and I will be here after the meeting, after I go through all of this. Now, this presentation, in order to give everybody an update, will take me 10 minutes. It is 10:07. If you can hang in here for 10 minutes, I will have time to give the same respect to you with 10 minutes of questions so we can move forward with the agenda. But I want to be able to address your questions. I want to be able to one-on-one address your questions with more time afterwards. We have a 2-hour time slot after the meeting. But I'm going to go through and let you know what the incubator program. This incubator program is one of those national programs that we're going to be proud of, just like we were with military, just like we were with the creation of the Georgia Legal Services program at the insistence of the YLD, and just like we have been with our suicide prevention program. It's a very novel opportunity, and it is something we're very proud of, the bar being asked to participate in. Here are the basics, because I know a lot of you heard a lot of other stuff, but this is the basics. The basics start out with the timeline. When did this happen and how did we get here? In the summer of 2014, I was discussing with the members, actually with the executive director, plans to demolish and build out the 5th floor to create more leasable space in the State Bar Center. Before Cliff passed, he had a couple of things that he had talked to me about because we were involved in planning my year that he wanted to see done. One was to secure parking. The other one was to try to make certain we had the 5th floor ready to go. For those of you who never went to the 5th floor, it looked like a demilitarized zone, a scene out of Aliens. Cables, 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 raised wooden flooring and cables protruding in, around, under 42,000 square feet of space. It was an enormous leftover from the Federal Reserve, who communicated through all of the networks, the transactions. So there were cables, as in computer cables and fiber optic cables, and some of the executive officers, committee officers, did get a chance to see it. It looked terrible. And it would require thousands of dollars to remove and clean up and time to do it. So in the summer, I started, when I came in, thinking of, let's figure out how we're going to do this and what needs to be done to the building. During that discussion, in August of during that discussion, Bucky approached me about a concept he had been working on with the court and the law schools to try to bring to Georgia the innovative program of a young lawyer, basically incubator program. At our executive retreat in August in Tifton. We did a presentation on that concept, and the executive committee at that time moved to refer the matter to the Bar Center Committee for evaluation and recommendation on the uses of the space, leasing terms for the project, and build-out costs for the incubator, because the incubator was to be included in the build-out of the 5th floor. As we were cleaning it up, we build in a space and have it occupied by a tenant. In September of 2014, the Bar Center Committee approved recommending to the EC several items related to improvements on the 5th floor and the building. So they voted to approve making the improvements to the 5th floor at that time. That included costs to renovate the bathrooms to make them ADA compliant of approximately $162,000. And when I've rounded up a couple of $1,000s to make certain I'm giving you a very conservative number. They actually had a dollars and cents in their minutes. 2, cost to demolish and remove the remaining flooring and casing for communications cabling left by the Federal Reserve. It cost $82,000 to clean it up. And then costs for architectural drawings for the build-out of the 5,300 square feet requested for the incubator site. That was $750, recommendation approved by the Bar Center Committee. In October of 2015, the Executive Committee met and reviewed the recommendations for the Bar Center Committee, and it passed a motion that the State Bar will work with the 5 law schools in Georgia to develop a law school incubator program, which would include a provision of office space at the bar, subject to approval by the State Bar of a final budget and operational procedures for the proposed incubator program was approved. And that's worded, but that's actually the language. I'm dealing with the language from the minutes, so that's how it's reflected. So that's when the Executive Committee first approved us going forward and working with the team of people who are stakeholders in the incubator program. In January of 2015, the Bar Center Committee approved a motion to recommend to the East Executive Committee that space be provided for the project, rent-free for 3 years, with the location of the space to be determined by the State Bar staff. What ended up happening between September, when the Bar Center Committee approved build-out of the 5th floor, and January, when they left the State Bar staff to determine where it was going to go, is that we lost a major tenant on the 4th floor. We lost the Prosecuting Attorney's Council, and they took up thousands, like 20,000 square feet, 23,000 square feet. And as a result of that vacancy, the idea was, okay, let's not build out the 5th floor. We've got space on the 4th. Let's go down to the 4th. Between January and now, we have filled up the 4th floor again. And so we have been very successful in leasing the vacated space or the intended vacated space for the Prosecuting Council to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. They have taken up all the other space. And so there's no place to go on the 4th floor. In January of 2015, the Executive Committee voted to approve the recommendations of the Bar Center Committee to provide a rent-free space to the incubator for space identified by the State Bar staff on the 4th floor and recommend the same to the Board of Governors for approval. The difference between these two is that they left out in the minutes the word staff. That was actually, we were going with a recommendation from the executive director and staff on where it should be located. And I put that in parentheses to let you know if you go back and look at the minutes, I'm not changing anything, it's not there, but it was supposed to be. So when it came down here, we ended up putting State Bar staff in there correctly. So the executive committee approved that. This is what the 5th floor looks like. Columns, no ceiling tiles, lights, ripped up flooring, but it's clean. This is 400% better than it looked when we first came in the summer. They've done a great job. This is almost what you call lease ready. What happens is as tenants come into a building, you have to build out their space to their order. So we would put flooring, ceiling, and walls based on specs. And the supportive columns would stay the same, and walls might be built around them. But this is what your space looks like right now. It's empty. This is why, when we started in the summer, the fifth floor was the option, and the fifth floor was considered by the Bar Center to be the best place because we have to start to build this out in order to make it leasable. One of the first things we have to do is to build out the restrooms, which are there, but are not ADA compliant. All right. The Board of Governors, because some people ask me these questions, I'm trying to anticipate a lot of these questions so we can move forward with this, is being asked at its June meeting, not this meeting, to approve support of the incubator program by providing a rent-free space for the program for 3 years during the initial startup of the program. This will be the bar's way of providing financial support to this worthwhile project to enable it to be launched. There is no other financial funding, dues increase, allotment, assessment, etc., acquired or associated with this proposal. We are one of, I think it's 19 or 12, 18, how many Bucket stakeholders? You counted that long list? I have the list in your, booklet of all the not in your booklet. You got a material insert providing details on the incubator program. It's got a letter with me stapled in that package. You have the names of the institutions that are involved. It includes all 5 accredited law schools. It includes Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers, Georgia Legal Services, Atlanta Legal Aid. It includes the Atlanta Bar Association's solo practice section, the State Bar of Georgia, the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism, and the Supreme Court. You also have in your board book commitment letters from each of the 5 law schools manifesting their commitment to the project, their financial support of the project, and you have a letter from the Chief Justice who is very, very supportive of this project. This is a summary of how the framework of the program is designed to occur. A separate entity called the Lawyers for Equal Justice, Inc. is being created. It's a 501c3. That entity will have representatives from these stakeholders on the board, and that entity will run, supervise, and oversee the incubator. That entity, just like other entities that we have affiliation with, will be a part of the bar's programs, but we are not the entity running it. There is another board, just like CJCC and some other projects I will talk to you about, that have their own independent nature, but they're still a bar-affiliated program. The 501c3 will have, it's 12 stakeholders, but I did count them. We'll have representatives from 12 stakeholders who have been involved with the development of the program, and that board will create the policies and programs to govern and oversee the program. The way it works is the incubator will be populated by 2 students for each law school from each of the 5 participating law schools, total of 10 students, not 2 students, 10 law graduates. They have to be lawyers, excuse the reference to students. That's what happens when you do it at 12 o'clock at night, for every 6 months. And they will participate in the program. So at the full phasing, 18 months from the time we start up, there will be 30 people in an incubator doing 3 things, everybody, because everybody gets caught up in you helping somebody. 3 things. 1, providing services to people that are currently not being able to be served by entities like Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers, Atlanta Legal Aid, and the Georgia Legal Services Program. 2, learning how to operate a practice so that we decrease the number of lawyers we're putting on the street who are not capable of doing a practice, generating bar complaints, generating negative goodwill in the public, and just having problems out there because they don't have the same options you and I had when you left law school. There are not firms taking them in, even small firms taking them in, to provide them the structured training environment. And that's a national problem. It's a problem that Pat Connors and Allegra Lawrence Hardy's long-range planning committee identified as being a challenge to the bar and something that the bar needed to be focused on from the long-range planning committee report from last year. So it's not something new. We have a problem with this. By the time we get to be 30 students in the practice, right, we have they will be generating some revenue to help sustain the program. Each of the 5 law schools have committed in writing to provide the $25,000 as the initial capital to get the program running. The Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism provided $15,000 already to do to allow Bucky to do studies, evaluations, and visit sites to create a best-in-class program. This will be the first program where the State Bar has worked in conjunction with the law school, and that in itself is historic, because that shows that there's some collegiality and some willingness to work together with people who have a vested interest in the success of lawyers in this state. We've been working with those 5 law schools and the stakeholders to develop just the basic principles. How is it going to work? What is it going to be? The program is designed to be self-sustaining by year 3. First question, why should the bar be involved with this program? This is the very type of program that strategic policy setters for the state with regard to legal services needs to be involved in, needs to guide, needs to direct, and needs to be committed to. We have a problem with the lack of access to justice. We will have a steady stream of lawyers providing services more numerous than we can do right now, and more numerous than, despite my pleas, everybody's standing up to take. Cases that no one wants. People are going to the courts, clogging the courts because they don't have legal services. We need to be interested, we need to be involved in the solution. It'll also be a way to help younger lawyers obtain experience in several areas and learn to operate their own law firm. These types of programs are also being used to test new legal services delivery methods and techniques, which will hopefully result in new and more efficient ways to handle pro bono or low bono cases for lawyers. And these types of ideas are not so novel. I mean, remember the day before you did mail merge? Remember the day before you had a mail merge complaint? Remember the day before you had cell phone service? No one could envision the changes that just those simple technologies made on your practice. And there are still more that could be received based upon somebody actually trying to find a way to make it with less money. The 5 law schools and the stakeholders are looking for our State Bar to take a supportive lead in the creation of the innovative programs to address the lack of access to justice problems in our state. Next question. We've been asked, how much is it going to cost the State Bar and where will the funds come from? The State Bar has been asked to house the incubator and to allocate and build out 5,300 or so square feet of space on our vacant 5th floor. The cost of the build out of the space is estimated to be between $240,000 to $260,000. This amount is needed in addition to the cost to renovate the bathrooms on the 5th floor, which have to be done anyway, because they have to be made ADA compliant for all tenants of the 5th floor. This is not a bathroom for just the incubator. It's a bathroom to be shared by all tenants on the 5th floor. The bathroom renovations are estimated to cost $162,000. Renovations to the bathrooms were being contemplated, remember the timeline? In the summer of 2014 as a way of getting that space ready for leasable tenants. These type of renovations to common areas are not paid for by the tenants. They are paid for by the landlord to facilitate you having a space. The elevator shaft, the central area, lobby area, the bathrooms, those are things you don't pay rent on. You have an expense in most leases that includes the maintenance of those common area expenses, but you don't generally pay for in your rent those spaces. You do pay for, in most leases, the cost to build out your space over time. So that's the reason I'm saying the $240,000 to $250,000 is an investment in the program to build out the space, but the space is not unique. If the incubator fails the next day, we have a space that can be let. The funds for the build out of the space are to be occupied by the incubator, and the restrooms will come from approximately $6 million in bar reserves. That varies. It could be 6.6, it could be 6.2, it could be 5.8, depending on how much money we made that month. What I can tell you from being on a finance committee for 17 years is we've always made money on the bar center, and it has accumulated. And we've used those funds to build out tenant spaces over the years so that all 5 other floors, there's 6 floors in the building, right? All 5 other floors have been built out, paid for, and the building paid for from the money from the Bar Center. So these expenses, $250,000 or so, will come from that. The 5th floor is the only floor on the Bar Center which has not been prepared for leasing. Currently, there's no other leasable space. If the incubator were charged rent, the other part of this question, the rent would be approximately $71,550 per year. That's based on the number of square feet that they're planning on occupying times the dollar rate of, I think it's $13.50, $14.50, and then it's going to be a little bit higher, $14.50 per square foot of space that everybody else charges. Steve, can you do the $14.50 times 530, and I'll give them the right number? $79,000. I use $13.50. All right, the next one. Question, can we spend funds to benefit a group of lawyers and not everyone? Yes. The State Bar is not required to use funds that it collects from its members or generates from the operation of the Bar Center to all lawyers. There are numerous examples of programs to which every lawyer is not eligible to participate, in which we spend money or provide support. Here are some of them. All of these are great programs, and I'm not picking at any of them. I'm using these for examples of programs that we fund bar dues, Bar Center monies, but bar dues for these programs to help some lawyers. The transition into law practice encourages expenses for just a few new lawyers. The services offered by the Lawyers Assistance Program are only received by a few lawyers. Basics provides benefits in a worthy program to non-lawyers. YLD program provides benefits to a quarter of our membership, and the internship program, the P, and I probably don't have enough P's, right? PIIP programs were instituted several years ago where we provided funds to incentivize young lawyers, actually law students, to provide services to nonprofit entities. These are all excellent programs, and the PIIP program was an example of a phenomenal new program and project where we made a difference in addressing the needs of our members, but everybody didn't benefit. All law students didn't benefit throughout the state. The bar's participation will utilize existing unrestricted Bar Center reserves and not result in a dues increase. Questions? Yes, sir, come to the mic, Dwayne. So it's kind of in between. 76.8.
A lot of
Yes, sir.
time and-
It's on.
It is?
Yes,
All
it is,
right.
Dwayne.
A lot of time and effort's been put into this program, but what do you envision at the end of the 3 years happening?
Okay. At the end of the 3 years, you all have been given some sheets today that were disseminated at our question and answer session that shows the income and expenses. It's a one-pager. We envision that at the end of the 3 years, this program will be self-sustaining because the number of participants who've gone through the program would have been sufficient enough that the fees they charge would generate enough money to keep the center going. Now, the reason that the Bar Center Committee and the Executive Committee, and myself for that matter, agree to only 3 years is that's enough time to see if it's working, to see if it's sustainable, and the lease is not a continuation lease. It's a 3-year lease, it's over. So that's the reason we're hoping at that point in time we can do a look-see to make certain it's working. The entity that's being created will be responsible for generating funds and revenues, but I do not envision, nor have I ever asked, nor would I consent to or agree to us coming back with any other monies to support it. All right? That's, yes, ma'am.
I
Dawn.
apologize if this is covered in the materials and I just didn't see it, but how are clients going to find these attorneys? Are they responsible for their own marketing? Is the State Bar doing the marketing? I didn't see anything in the budget mentioned about marketing expenses.
That's a very good question. There is no marketing or any type of services being provided by the State Bar other than training. The existing training programs for both the transition into practice, the mentorship programs, law practice management, those classes will be available to those participants, but there's no marketing. We expect that the participants have to generate their own book of business, and they have to do the pro bono, low bono services by referral from the partnering agencies. Atlanta Legal Aid will provide some cases. Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers will provide some cases and training on the areas of subject areas that are related to those cases. So landlord tenant, domestic relations, domestic violence, they will be training on those programs, as well as Georgia Legal Services. So they will do like everybody else, try to generate their own other paying business, and they will generate their own reduced fee schedule that is subject to approval by that board. So we're not marketing, this is nothing that we're doing, is putting forth solicitations or marketing or telling them the names of the attorneys. None of that will come from the State Bar.
Okay. I have other questions, but I'll take turns.
I have a list of questions.
Okay.
The first one is, why is this a bar program and not a law school program that the bar is simply providing financial support to? Number one. Number two.
Okay, let me give me the favor of let me answer, because I'm not
Okay.
taking notes like I'm in court.
Sure.
The first one is the reason why it's a bar center program is because of the fact that we have worked with the law schools and the other stakeholders to try to pull it together. We think it's best that it's centralized from the beginning at one location. There's been an indication of one law school that they may decide to develop a South Georgia incubator at Mercer, but they too are invested committed to the 25,000 because they want to see all the kinks worked out up here. So that's the reason for that.
No, what I'm saying is, why is it a bar program, not a law school program that the bar is just simply providing financial support to?
Right. Well, I've answered that question.
Okay.
The next question.
I don't see how that, well, anyway. Secondly, what are the other costs? You mentioned just the build-out costs.
Right.
But what about costs for security, parking, administrative help, all of those things? You've got 125,000.
Right.
But there's other costs. You've got security, you've got people coming into the building that aren't lawyers. You've got, again, the parking issues. You've got bar staff being used. There's other costs. And then we keep talking about this unrestricted reserve. We just gave $500,000 for client security funds. At some point, that $6 million seems to be divvied up, and what is that going to do to our bar dues? Because we're using that to burn down and avoid bar due increases, and now we're going to be offering $250,000. It's just, to me, we're constantly using, it's kind of like the candy jar we keep reaching into, this unrestricted reserve to fund programs that could be funded by other groups like the law schools. If they think they need to incubate, the law school should come up with more money than what they're coming up with.
Okay, so to answer the question with regard to how much additional monies or revenues would it cost, there are no additional costs for security because security is for the entire building. There's nothing on the 5th floor, 4th floor, 3rd floor different than the main entrance. There's no additional costs for parking because this lease will not have any parking spaces provided in it because, as I told you earlier, we don't have any parking spaces, and we need parking for the 5th floor. So there are no parking spaces being provided to the incubator participants, and they will have to find their own spaces somewhere else. In fact, it will say that you can't park on premises because we don't have it. Any of their clients will have to be told the same thing, such that there's no parking available in our bar center until we find some alternative arrangements. So there's no extra cost for that. Now, the issue with regard to the reserves, it's probably a person's opinion, but the reasons why those people who were around, and Elena's one of them, who when we were creating these reserves, we were using the reserves to make certain we had enough money to build out the 5th floor. Enough money to put chillers, water chillers, replace them. Enough money to do the roof. Enough money to do things that needed to be done in the building. Carpet, tile, no matter what. We have, in addition to the $6 million of unrestricted reserve, $2 million for the bar center itself in event of a catastrophe that is not insured, and something happens and we have to rebuild. So, as has been pointed out by numerous people, we have enough reserves. The problem is the unrestricted reserves are being used as a source to take care of some of the dues and prevent dues increases. But that's not how it was designed to be. The unrestricted reserves were not designed to be a cushion for our dues. In fact, Alvin was here in the beginning, and I don't know if Chris is still here too. People were frightened that the bar center would cause your dues to increase at the time because they thought it would be a drain. So we're having the benefit of the opposite result because the original No, the discussion of whether or not you are doing now keeping the bar center, using the bar center dues to keep, the reserves to keep bar dues flat, is not something that's come to vote or approval as a policy. And what I indicated was that at the beginning of the time, when we were buying the building, at the inception of this process, there was concern that the bar center would drain our reserves and cause our dues to creep. So it is a personal decision of whether or not you think the utilization of funds that we've accumulated in time should be spent on some programs or just always left to take care of your dues. Reasonable people could differ. Yes, ma'am.
Law school students typically don't have a lot of experience with marketing. Have you done any analysis of whether these recent law grads would actually be able to survive under this model?
You know, there are, what is it now, 40 incubators, and they are surviving. The model, it can be more or less successful depending on a variation of themes. What we're trying to do in this 3-year window is to see what works, what doesn't work, what could help, whatever. But what I can tell you is the bar is not marketing for them, but the bar may be offering classes of how you rainmake or how you generate clients, because those classes are already available to the bar, to members of their bar through the law practice management courses. So we're going to take information from this program and figure out what works and what doesn't work, because we want it to be wildly successful. However, I can't tell you right now whether it will or won't. Bucky has been to all of these major places, Chicago, DC. He's been across the country looking at them. And I can tell you that the bar or any entity that's hosting it, law schools, et cetera, doesn't market for them.
Do they have any statistics that they've given to you that you could share with us?
No, there's no statistics available. In fact, we were talking about this is all a very new kind of concept, so you haven't had the time period to generate empirical data. Yes, sir.
Have we thought through what the percentage of time will be that they're going to devote to pro bono versus their own practices?
The actual percentage of time has not been established, because as they define the policies and procedures and they figure out the contract that's going to be signed by those attorneys, that percentage will be figured and included in that contract as participant. What I can tell you is the range is in excess of 30%, but we don't know if it's 50 or 60. It depends on what the experts in these areas will come together. But it's a significant portion of time, especially if you're only here for 18 months, learning how to operate a practice. It will be a significant chunk of time.
And so that goes back to the earlier question of, if we're putting the state bar's imprimatur on this and it's a state bar program,
Right.
the concern, there were questions at the Atlanta meeting about how that ties into liability. If someone is working under the banner of the state bar and whether they're filing suit or defending suits, taking positions on issues in their private practice, and they've got the state bar banner, I think we need to think through what that means for the bar in terms of liability.
We did, as a result of that meeting, we did have that issue vetted again, specifically with both our Office of General Counsel and then the broker for our insurance policy. And what we concluded from their research, and we are still waiting on one component, the actual underwriter. So we've gone from bar counsel, broker, and waiting for the underwriter to actually issue written comments. But the findings they found so far is that the state bar already has insurance for programs that it has for which people provide services. We have several programs that we currently operate that people could be filing claims for malpractice. What the requirements would be is that the program, the insurance policy that we have in place to protect the state bar would not protect the entity that is called the Lawyers for Equal Justice. It will not protect the participants in the incubator program. And so the concept has always been, and we mentioned that at the meeting, that the participants in the program would have to have their own malpractice insurance. The entity that is the Lawyers for Equal Justice would have to have its insurance, and then those insurance policies would have to be tailored such that they protect and indemnify the state bar. But the coverage that we have in place does not change whether it's a project or a program to protect the state bar. It is not going out with the state bar's logo. Remember, I told you there's another entity called the Lawyers for Equal Justice, so the program and its communications will be labeled under that. We are just a participant and supporter and the houser of that program, but it's not going out as the State Bar of Georgia's lawyer education just for equal justice. It's the Lawyers for Equal Justice program.
Well, and it may be just for purposes of this presentation, but we've got State Bar Incubator Program
Right,
here.
and that's because that is how I am dealing with it right now. The board of that entity has not come up with a name. They haven't done any of that. This is our program. I'm requesting your approval to use space to be our donation contribution as a partner in the development of it. But it would not be titled this, and I agree with you. If it was titled this, that would create some different issues, but we still would be protected. I want you to know that under the existing policies, if those other components were put into place. We would have no new liability. We already have some liability for that already. Yes, okay. Yes, ma'am. Helena.
Hi. I think it's an exciting idea to have an incubator program. I think we're all sort of struggling with the information that we're getting and the extent to which the State Bar should be involved and the financial commitment that the State Bar might be willing to make with respect to such an interesting endeavor. As you know, I'm a very financial-focused person, and I appreciate the information that came in the board book and came subsequent to the board book, and I attended the presentation or the discussion we had yesterday, and there was more information provided here, and I do appreciate all that. I just wanted to talk through a couple of numbers, and there doesn't need to be a response now. This is more to talk about what more information I would personally be interested in before the vote in June. The numbers that I took down here were that the build-out was $260,000 for this program in particular, that build-out plus the build-out that was planning to be done anyway for that floor would total just over $500,000, and that the rent abatement over 3 years would be approximately $237,000. So we're in the range of $750,000 for the program. Admittedly, some of that would be used for other things, for other tenants. And when you consider the fact that there are potentially 90 lawyers who are going to participate in this program over that 3-year period, it looks like the spend is about $8,300 per person that the bar would be committing to assist these individuals in getting their practices up and running. And so having more detail about the numbers to know whether that is in fact what we're looking at or not, I think would be helpful.
Okay, Elena, I don't know what other details you would need. We've given
Well,
you
I
the
don't know whether
cost for
those
the-
numbers are right. I've just written
That's
down,
correct.
right, okay.
That's correct. The amount of money for the improvements has been provided. The
Mm-hmm.
amount of money for the renovations of the bathroom, which are not a part of this improvement, has been provided. The only thing I think you're missing are some of the details on the final numbers of how much each of those participants is expected to pay. We've given you projections, but the board has not met to set those numbers, and they wouldn't have met to set those numbers before June.
Right.
So you're correct, but the difference that I want to just call to your calculation is you mentioned 90 students in two 18-month cycles. Over 3 years, there would only be 60 students.
Okay,
Is
so it
that
would be
right?
a larger dollar amount
60
per
students.
student.
And those dollar amounts would be sunk cost and not, if it continues, there would not be additional infrastructure improvement needed for the next 10, 20 years.
Right.
So the price per student would go down depending on how long the incubator exists.
Depending on how long the incubator.
right,
And so
so-
having all of those numbers would be helpful in
Well, you have them.
understanding.
You got them all.
Well, in understanding whether it's a 3-year lease or a 10-year lease
It's a
or a
3-year
5-year
lease.
lease or what it is. Okay.
3-year
And
lease,
then
no
the
more.
second piece, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, was the fact that we ran through the projected numbers of what they're planning to charge the students as revenue.
Yes.
And we came up with a number of $126,000 a year that when it's up and running, that will be the revenue from the student fees. And the budget that was provided to us has the cost, the annual cost of the program at $116,000, not including rent, which would give them $10,000 for rent or cushion or what have you. And so how they're planning to be sustainable after 3 years, if that continues to be the fee structure they're having. I am assuming they're planning to reach out for donations somewhere and what their business plan is for that. So those would be kind of the things that I would be interested in
All
learning
right.
about.
I can guarantee you, you won't have a business plan for an entity that doesn't exist right now by June. I
Okay.
can guarantee you that the members of that board will develop a plan that will be presented in a way that will promote sustainability, because all of them are interested in the entity's survival. What they provided to you now is what they have developed, Bucky has developed, and Bucky, I'm up here talking, but I want you all to know that Bucky has done a phenomenal job with pulling this together for months, and I to commend you for doing that and providing us with the resources to make the informed decisions. But in doing that, there will change over time, the mix, the fees, everything will alter it in order to make certain it's sustainable. What is clear is I'm not offering any more money. And I don't think Bob is offering any more money. And I don't think Rita is offering any more money. So you got 3 years of people saying there's no more money but the space, which means that they have to find more revenue from other places. And it is possible. It is not difficult. It is possible. And when we get back in the 3 years, they may have enough revenue from other spaces identified to pay the full hit on rent. But that would be a decision we make, or to continue it. That's why it's a finite 3 years, finite commitment of no more additional monies. All right,
Okay,
were
thank
you
you.
next?
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure to keep the time up, right?
One of the goals of this program is to build competence of these new attorneys, and I think that's great. Is the director going to be an attorney who's practiced, or are they just going to have each other to bounce ideas off of?
No, actually, the director that the LEJ will hire will be under contract to provide services and serve as a coordinator of mentors, training programs, et cetera. That person will be a lawyer, and what the terms and details of their job description and the amount of money they're going to finally offer them will be determined by the board, but the fact that they're a lawyer is a given. All right, yes, sir.
Of the 40 programs around the country that you mentioned are up and running, how many are bar programs and how many are contained within the law schools?
Remember I told you that this ours will be the first one, bar program in the
Okay.
country. Okay, law schools have, how many, Bucky? 3/4.
Okay.
But when the law school does it, they don't have the coordinated hit. They have 3, 5, 6 people going through an incubator at that school versus 30. And the concentrated force of that being available for access to justice. However, each of those schools had the same concept of trying to provide some access to justice and some training ground for their attorneys. It's just done on a much smaller model. And unfortunately, our law schools have not decided to do that in-house.
Right. Well, then that's the question. Why aren't the law schools picking up this baton and running with it, since it's a law school problem in terms of getting their graduates jobs? And why is it a
Well,
bar
I think
problem?
that's an interesting way of looking at it. It's a state bar problem that that the lawyers don't have jobs, and it's a state bar problem, and we've discussed this before with having access to justice, ways to address that. And this is just one of numerous ways our state bar, before the law schools, came up with dealing with this project as a part of the long-range planning committee. So we actually bought into having some type of vehicle or methodology to have a concentrated incubator for the purposes of providing access to justice. So I understand that you disagree and you'd like to have the law schools, but they're not at the table with a proposal. And so we're working forward to deal with a crisis. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam President,
Yes.
distinguished guests, fellow board members, I'm Dennis O'Brien from Cobb County. My guess would be that every lawyer in this room would do what they need to do to help another lawyer, and particularly a young lawyer. Well, they wouldn't be here today. And I expect that most of us have great respect for the fact that you have the inclusive way in which you've run the bar this year and brought new people into positions of leadership. And I particularly appreciate the fact you've taken this off the action agenda today so we can discuss it and vote on it at a later time. However, as to the incubator program, respectfully, Madam President, the idea of subsidizing in whole or in part private practice in our bar headquarters by mandatory dues and assessments, especially paid by new lawyers not fortunate enough to be part of this program, may be a very difficult concept for some. The incubator program looks like it's a very generous project, but it also appears that it's quite limited in scope in its region. It's a very select group of lawyers in the Atlanta area that will benefit by it. And perhaps rather than providing a great benefit to such a small group, select group, we might consider programs that expand the scope of our generosity to include new attorneys all over the state of Georgia. Just some random thoughts that I had would be, for example, a dues abatement for new lawyers, or waive section fees for new lawyers, or reduce fees for mandatory CLEs for new lawyers, or insurance programs for health or E&O insurance that perhaps they could buy into cheaply, or perhaps waive the client security fund, or the bar assessment for the new lawyers. The aspirational goals of the program seem very good, and I don't have the details, and I will reserve judgment until I do, but I just ask three things. First of all, that we get the details. And secondly, that we have the name of a person that can provide the details to us if we need to contact somebody. And third, that the Board of Governors have the opportunity to debate and discuss this thing and ultimately rule on this question. Thank you.
To answer your questions, Dennis, the person who's a contact person is Bucky Hewitt, and he's right here. He does it. Excuse me. I do that. His name is Hewitt Askew, and I get it confused. Bucky is here. He has his cards. His information was in the letter that I provided. I said you could contact him. So if you keep that information, there is no more detailed information coming. You've got the entire plan. You've got the summary of how it's going to work in multiple pages. You've got the dollars and cents today. You've got the dollars for the renovation. I agree, Dennis, that some people will not agree with this project. I think the vast majority of you will. This is a project that is serving more people than some of the other programs we work that don't serve 60 people. But we still pay money for because they are of benefit to the people that they are intended to be. Sometimes creative things are a little painful, sometimes change is painful, but we will have a discussion. I'm supposed to be providing you information. That's the purpose of this meeting today. You will have 2 months to digest it, and some of you will vote it up, and some of you will vote it down. Hold on just a second, Joe. He was first, then you, and then I'll come up to you.
Madam President, as I understand it, the participants in this program will provide some pro bono services and some individual services.
That's correct.
My question really is, how is that going to be determined, and who's going to be determining? In other words, who are the individuals that are going to be deciding you are doing enough pro bono, you're not doing enough pro bono to stay in the program, and are there provisions to be removed from the program if you're not providing enough? Because that really is I don't want to subsidize, a lawyer that's going to have a 90%, criminal defense or personal injury practice, that they're going to be just fine, and what we're doing is paying their rent. I want, if the bar is going to at least have a big influx of money from, as Dennis said, dues paying member, I want to know that that money is going to be used for its intended purpose. And without those details, and maybe they're there, I just haven't seen how that is going to be done. That's my major question.
That is going to be a part of a board for which your name was put in the nomination. There's a lot of people who we put on the board who are people who are concerned about just that very issue. We are not pulling together a program to launch people in their practice without getting significant, over 30%. I don't know if they're going to go to 50. I don't know what the board's going to do. But what I want you to know is that that's why the bar is interested. It's for the purpose of providing access to justice. So as that board pulls together their policies, contracts, forms, commitments, it will have a provision that says if you're not doing it, you got to pay something back. There will be incentives built in, but there will be a way of dealing with that contractually with that entity, not our entity. Our entity is being requested to provide a place to house it for a period of 3 years, and then we will be part of, in fact, 4 representatives from the board. It's the largest group of representatives will be on the board from the bar, and it will basically pull together that program. All those details have yet to be created.
Sure, but as I hear you saying, those details are not going to be available until after we voted whether we're going to have it or not.
All you're doing is voting whether or not you're going to give the space. See, the bar is being asked to support it by housing it and to be a part of the representative group of stakeholders to make the decisions on how it operates. You have been given the fact that it is going to do pro bono, large share of it. They are going to pay some fees for their services starting after month 6. That framework is not changing. What is changing is I don't know if it's going to be $300 a month or $500 a month. There is a board who will make that decision in order to address some of Elena's question. How much does it cost to make it sustainable? I do know that there is a concept, and we have talked about it, and they have agreed to it, of repayment of funds if you're not adhering to the guidelines. The director would be monitoring those. So there are things that are happening. Sometimes you have concepts that you have to put into place that don't have all of the letters that dot I's, T's crossed, and you're not asking to sign it. You're asking to be a member of a representative body who's establishing policies and procedures. You're being asked to provide space that we don't have a tenant for, we're not collecting any rent for. We have to spend $250,000 to $350,000, depending on how you interpret it. That's not how most people interpret build-outs. It's the space that you have to pay for and occupy. But I agree, if you want more, we're not going to have that by June. And it's not going to be there probably until the board meets and starts fashioning those principles. But it would be in existence before the first participant comes in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Joe?
As for the underserved, this access to justice idea, why are they not currently being served by our existing legal programs like Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid?
That's a good question. When I started my presidency, I did a lot of research into what was happening in the state. Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid have federally mandated constraints on what they do. They have a federally mandated income level, and then they are federally mandated on what types of cases they can handle. So a person making $10,000 a year may be income eligible, but if they need a divorce, they can't get it. A person making $20,000 a year with no children is not eligible. A person making $38,000 with a family of 3 is not eligible. So there are a lot of different reasons why thousands of people are not able to receive services, because if you make that little bit of money, you're still making too much money to qualify for Georgia Legal Services or Atlanta Legal Aid, but you don't have enough money to go $5,000 for a divorce attorney. You might be able to pay $50, you might be able to pay $100, you may not be able to pay any. So we're trying to deal with not just hundreds. The Chief Justice said it, not just me. There are thousands of people out there who have needs for wills, probate matters, immigration matters, domestic relation matters, things that need help with a lawyer, but we don't have the services available. But appreciate the question. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being patient.
That's fine.
I'm just trying to
I'm
make
Susan
sure.
Cox. I'm from Statesboro. I just left the Board of Bar Examiners after 6 years, and as a result, Sally Lockwood has done a wonderful job of keeping us informed as bar examiners of issues facing legal education. Law schools, I really think being a law school dean is probably one of the worst jobs in the world nowadays, because they face tremendous pressure to turn out practice-ready lawyers in a model that was created 150 years ago at Harvard Law School. They're not able to do it, yet the realities are that the economy now is such that law firms' clients are not going to pay for the law firms to provide that practice-ready training. So anything, to me, this is a low-cost, low-bar involvement means of helping that process of having practice-ready lawyers that the law schools maybe, I mean, there's some interesting things going on around the country. I don't know that we'll see some of those working in Georgia, but I'm just telling you, law schools are struggling to get lawyers out that can start practicing. They're just not in a position to do it. Frankly, I'm amazed that all 5 of them have committed to this. I think
It's been
Bucky
an act
probably
of
gets, I think Bucky gets a lot of credit for that because of his experience and background. To me, this is not a big deal to ask us to hire the space, and with regard to why legal services can't do it, I don't know about how it works where y'all are, but in Statesboro, we never see anybody from Georgia Legal Services unless our firm has agreed to accept the appointment to show up on behalf of legal services pro bono. They're spread too thin in the rural areas, and one of my hopes would be that if this program works, there'd be some ability to have these students come to Tifton and Savannah, where we have bar offices, and reach out in the more rural areas because they're not served. And low bono is a major problem because you have people that could afford to pay something, but they can't pay my hourly fee, and I'm a lot cheaper than people in Atlanta, I'm sure.
Thank you very much. Yes, Damon.
Yes, Madam President, Damon Elmore from the Atlanta Circuit. Actually, a point of personal privilege after Susan's statement. I think, to clarify, she's not saying that Georgia Legal Services doesn't make it to Bullitt County. It's just that our workload is such that we're spread very thin. So I just want to be sure that Georgia Legal Services is accurately represented there. A couple questions. One's a yes or no. In this discussion, technically, the discussion about the funds associated with the build-out and then the hosting of the incubator project are really separate discussions technically. Is that right?
No, because in order for us to build it out, we would have to.
But if the incubator project didn't exist and we were building out the 5th floor, that
Okay.
would still be that discussion,
That's correct. We would still have to have the discussion on build out a 5th floor. But there was no recommendation other than the bathrooms, in all honesty, for the 5th floor at the present time.
I'd like to hear more, and tell me who can answer, because I'm fascinated about the component of how this project, the incubator project, really does help improve delivery of legal services, which is a big deal for the State Bar of Georgia, especially from a laboratory standpoint and these innovative solutions about the flat fee systems, the new
Bucky.
technologies. Can Bucky speak to some of those issues?
I just called him up, Bucky, because he's been across the country. Bucky, can you provide some examples of how they've... No, come up here.
And so then while he's coming up, the only part would be about that is, in this discussion and in other discussions when creative and innovative programs have come up, we've taken a lot of opportunity and grateful for the chance to ask questions about them. But when we take these questions and answers back and we actually come up with solutions, we come up with ideas to help improve these programs, who would we deliver those solutions or ideas to when we leave here today? Would that be to you or to Bucky?
You can do it to either one. We have communicated and worked together on this. Bucky is the person, if you need detailed examples of what's happening across the country, he's the person studying the best case projects. Those type of detailed questions will be directed to him. If you have some ideas that we need to incorporate into it that are written, I'll take them and forward it to him as well.
And I'm talking particularly solutions. So
Okay,
ideas to help improve and promote this thing. That's the main thing that I'm
Go
talking
ahead and
about.
send them to me. I'm always interested
Okay,
in solutions.
good. Thank you. Bucky?
He wanted to know specifically some examples of where you've seen the incubator provide laboratory-like enhancements to the practice of law.
Right. Hi, I'm Bucky.
Ask you.
Ask you. I'm Tony's son. Let me quickly, we were going to have an information session after this to get into the weeds about all of this, but now it's all on the floor, so if you're willing to take the time. What an incubator is a postgraduate training and support program for recent law school graduates to fill certain gaps, to help those young lawyers build competent, sustainable private practices at charging reasonable fees, to help address access to justice issues while they're doing that, and to serve as a laboratory to test out certain new forms of delivery mechanisms, billing mechanisms, training mechanisms, to help lawyers generally outside of the lawyers in this incubator learn from this about ways they can build sustainable practices. The reality in today's world, based on what Susan told you, is that young people are graduating from law school today and setting up solo practices. Many of them are setting up solo practices. They're doing it without any support except from the Transition into Law program. They're doing it without any sort of business training. They have some good skills and some substantive law training, but they don't have any business training. And so it's worrisome. It's worrisome to the law schools that their graduates are doing this. It's worrisome to the bar that their young people doing this. It's worrisome to everybody that they're not going to be able to build a sustainable practice. This program is meant to fill that gap. And the training that will go on, there were earlier questions about marketing. Much of the training that's going to go on in this incubator, and there'll be a substantial amount of it that these kids will commit to, is going to be on law practice management, on business skills, on how do you run a law practice. And there will be substantive training, and there will be referral of cases, and they'll be working on cases, initially pro bono, almost exclusively, but ultimately they'll start building their own practice. But most of the training will be on practice issues, marketing skills, billing clients, collecting fees, all of those things they need to know. And that training will be done on the substantive area by the legal aid programs, Catholic Social Services on immigration cases, a whole range of groups I've already spoken to who are quite willing to do the training, substantive law training, for free. The business training will be done by solo practitioners who are going to be recruited from the Atlanta Bar Solo Practice section to come in and do two things. One, train these young people on running a successful solo practice, and two, there'll be a mentor, full-time mentor assigned to each one of these young people who is a solo practitioner in Atlanta. The director we hope to recruit is someone who's had solo practice experience. We're hoping to get someone who's had 10 years of experience actually running his or her own law firm and knows how to do this, who will be there full-time to provide assistance to these young people. There'll be 10 new young people coming in every 6 months. So after 18 months, there'll be 30, and then they'll rotate out after 18 months. There'll be 10 new coming in constantly. So I think there was an earlier question about what happens after the end of 3 years. I think the concern might have been, well, these 18 get trained, and then at the end of that time, they go out and the program's over. No, the program is constantly regenerating and bringing in new people into it throughout the entire period. And at the end of 3 years, 60 people would have been through it, but there'll be 30 people in it at the time the 3-year process ends. When we begin this project, we're going to set it up with outcome measures. In other words, we're going to decide what will define success of this program. And we're going to establish some outcomes that we want to see from it and measure all during the 18 months or 3 years. Are we meeting those outcomes? Are clients satisfied with the service? Are they building these practices? Are they charging lower fees than a going community? One thing that's happening in the access to justice community, broadly defined, is that access to justice is now coming to be viewed as people of modest means. There are people who do not qualify for legal aid, who have legal problems, who cannot afford a lawyer, or they believe they cannot afford a lawyer. So we need to reach out to those people and try to bring them into the process. It's estimated that there are 4 million citizens of the state of Georgia who fall into this modest means or low poverty population who need legal services, and fewer than 20% of them are getting legal services. Atlanta Legal Aid turns away one client for every one it accepts today. It has priorities. It can't meet all the needs. It can't serve all the community. It will not accept a family law case unless there's domestic violence or children involved. Those clients get turned away. They don't have a referral source, except AVLF, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers, who will try to find a volunteer lawyer for them. So anyway, I'm trying to cover a lot of ground here in a short period. But please, I would encourage any of you before June, if you have any specific questions or detailed issues you need answers to contact me. My contact information will be made available to you after this is over. But I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to send you more detailed documents that we have. Happy to talk to you about what I've seen from other incubators around the country. There are now 40. When I started this 2 years ago, there were 17. These are growing like topsy. They're growing all over the United States. The ABA Journal just had a big article about this 2 months ago. And this is a new form of trying to fill those gaps in access to justice, in training and support, and in helping young lawyers succeed as they begin their practices.
Thank you, Becky. At least you know who he is. We will be here after the meeting. The only people who can speak now to ask a question during this session are the ones who are at the microphone. So I'm going to recognize Judge Cannon because you were there longer, and I will come back, okay? But no new folks come up. We will be here in the afternoon. We're not voting on it right now. We're answering your questions, and we will spend 2 hours with anybody who has any other questions they'd like to ask. Yes, sir.
My questions are relating more to the space. So there was
Okay.
a comment I believe you made earlier
Yes.
that after PAC is leaving, that there was, my review of the minutes showed that there was still 10,000 square feet available, and I believe you made a comment a few months ago that it was filled.
gone.
Is that correct?
PAC took the rest, excuse me, not PAC, the criminal
CCLC.
CCC.
Okay, so public defender, so the entire vacancy has been filled. All right,
That's
that's the
correct.
first one. Second one is are we going to renovate the entire floor for this project?
We are
What
not.
portion of the floor?
5,300 divided by 42,000%. Because
So we
we're
still
only
have-
building out space. That's the
Still
consistent.
have over 30,000 square feet
Oh,
available?
yeah.
Okay.
A lot.
And the last information I had is we hadn't really found any viable tenants for this space. Is that correct?
No, there are no viable tenants.
right.
There are some proposals from people who might be interested in telecom type services, but they would not use 30-some odd thousand square feet.
That's
They
all
would
I
not
had.
use
Thank
that
you.
much. All right, yes, sir.
Madam President, I'm Judge Donnie Gillis. I'm from the Dublin Judicial Circuit.
Oh.
I'm in favor of this concept. I think it's a very good idea. But I believe, it is one of the aims of this project is to provide access to justice for the underserved community.
Yes.
And we're talking about putting this thing on the 5th floor of the State Bar headquarters,
Yes.
which already you've said has no parking facilities whatsoever for the people who are going to be participating in the project,
much less the clients that they wish to serve. And I wonder, and I question is, has the State Bar given any consideration to finding one more accessible space located in an area that is in the area where these people are going to be coming from? We're in Dublin. Legal aid that's closest to us is in Macon, and the biggest problem we have is the people getting access to the office where these services are to be provided. And if they're in the State Bar headquarters where there's no parking, we also have security issues of people coming and going, out of that building. I just wonder if we couldn't find a cheaper space in a more convenient location for the parties who are going to be utilized in this process.
This particular location was agreed upon by all the law schools, and so the selection of our site as being a centralized site because we could provide the training there without additional costs incurred for all of some of the things that someone else mentioned. We don't have to provide off-site security. We don't have to provide administrative services. We don't have to provide additional training. So that's why we're running with this for 9 months, is because that location was decided as the initial pilot. I firmly believe that if it's as successful as all the other programs have been, and we envision it to be, it would branch out to some of the other offices, either the Tifton and Savannah or both. But we have to get it started somewhere where the resources are already centrally located. There will be 30 people who can't park, but a lot of the people that they serve, and at least in this area, are going to catch the bus. And so they will deal with that issue, but they only have to deal with it for each of those one lawyers 18 months at a time. And then they're gone and another person comes in. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two things. Number one, I don't see a big difference between this program and then the rural lawyer program.
Right.
We're not spending any money for the rural lawyer program. We're asking the state to do it.
Right.
Why can't we put this in with that and ask the state to do this? It seems like they're very, very similar things. You're asking them to provide lawyers for people who don't have access to lawyers, whether it's out in the country or whether it's poor people in Atlanta. It just seems like the two go together. We're not paying money for the country. Why are we paying money for the city?
Okay.
Number one. Number two, when you say 50% pro bono, that's not sustainable.
30 to 50. We haven't fixed the number.
Okay, even 30% pro bono is not sustainable in private practice. I practice in Paulding County. I pat myself on the back. I have a very successful solo practice. I do voluntary pro bono through Cobb Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services. I do involuntary pro bono for clients who pay me up front and then can't pay me.
I don't know what that is.
I do reduced fee cases for veterans and other people who I think deserve a reduced fee, and I have paying clients. But none of that, I'm telling you, can you sustain a practice with 30% pro bono or 30% low bono? So if you're bringing these people in and telling them that's what you're going to do, and then after 18 months they go make it, they're not going to make it.
Yeah, I want to give you another scenario to look at. Right now, those law students, after they pass the exam and they get sworn in, have nothing.
No, it's not true. You just said they have transition into law program. They have all these other programs.
No, they have no income. Hold it. They have no income, and they have no clients, and they have no skills. They do go through the transition. I was focusing on the point of your question about sustainability. For the next 18 months, they may not have much more than they have if they didn't have a job for 3 years, which this was the average is. If they didn't have that, they'd at least get some benefit from practical cases, some intensive training on some basic skills and cases that you can get from friends, neighbors, church members. They have something more by virtue of going through the incubator than they would right now. And so, I understand that you might disagree, but I'm saying that the models show that these young lawyers are coming out and working as waitresses.
Well, I would be willing to pay $1,000 a month for downtown office space, and I'll open up a satellite office for my practice down there, because I can pay you $1,000 a month for downtown office space and do 30% pro bono, and I can bring in personal injury clients to make enough money to make that worthwhile, easily. So it's not, it's not something that works, I think, in the bar center.
Well, we hope that it will. We hope it'll be successful. The others have proven to be. To answer your question, the rural lawyers is a little different in that people have to live there, and they have to be there for 5 years, and they have to commit to being, really, they have to have a little bit more experience than just immediately out of school to be successful, but we will help them with the same type of that we provide to all of our members wherever they're located, and as well as mentors to help them. But it's a little different. I need to move on because we are at, right now, Well, you can't make a statement from out there. You'd have to go to the microphone, and I did make a request that the last three people, I'll be here, and you'll get a chance to make it in June. If you don't, whoop. Well, then you'll wait to June, because we need to move on. It's 11:14. The next item on the agenda, Treasurer's Report.
Good morning. All right, let's move on to a topic. This will be fairly brief and it'll be very positive. So with that lead in, on pages 107 to 111 of your board book are the usual reports that will give you the picture of where we are. We are 2/3 of the way through the bar year, through the fiscal year. And let's go to, Sarah, if we can go to the next slide. There's my conclusion, which has been the conclusion for all of the other reports so far this year, that we have, we're in excellent fiscal condition, we have steady member growth, and we have solid bar center performance. So that should be, we could actually stop there, but I'm going to give you a few more pieces of information. Here is sort of the bar year projection. And I will say, and I don't see Steve Lane in the room at the moment, but we are projecting that this year we're going to spend a little more than we have in prior years. We've been running more 92, 93% of projection. This year it's probably going to be closer to 95%. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about why that is in a moment, but it is going to be a little higher than previous years. And I thought, rather than our usual slides, I just wanted to give you a couple of notes, both on the revenue side and on the expense side. So if we can look at the next slide, just a couple of revenue notes. We are slightly above our budget this year. Talk about membership just a little bit. We're going to be very slightly above our budget of new active members. However, we are seeing a real increase in the number of new attorneys who are joining as inactive members. And I mean, we could guess what the reasons for that were, but presumably that has to do with the continuing difficulties in the job market. And that's something that we're watching to see if that's going to be a trend that's going to continue. But definitely this year we're seeing an increase in the number of new attorneys joining as inactive. We also are seeing an increase in the number of attorneys switching to emeritus status. And again, there could be, we could all be, guessing as to why that is, whether the economy might be a little better and some folks who've been practicing can finally retire, or just whether we've got the aging population that is moving into that category. But again, Steve has been keeping a close eye on this, and we're just going to watch how that develops over the next year or so. Second point on the revenue is that last year you approved prorating dues for new attorneys so that they don't pay the full amount if they're not a member for the full year. And so that has resulted, or will result, in a cost to the bar of about $100,000. But that obviously was helpful to the new attorneys to not have to be tagged with a full year of dues if they're not actually going to be members for the full year. Some of these other items are not going to be any big surprise. Our late fee revenue continues to increase, so people are delaying a little later being able to actually pay their dues. And so we've seen an uptick in that, which is positive on our revenue side, but I know at least for me that would be of some concern as to why some of our members are paying late. And then we have the Pro Hoc Vice. As I reported earlier, we've made a substantial contribution to the Georgia Bar Foundation as a result of the rules changes on Pro Hoc Vice fees. That has, of course, resulted in a negative to the state bar of about $100,000 because that was money that was coming into the bar, which we now are sending over to the Georgia Bar Foundation. So that's a negative on our line item, but obviously it's a positive for civil legal services. And the last item on the revenue that I wanted to mention is that we're seeing a decline in advertising revenue to the tune of about $30,000, which is about 25%. And so that, again, is of some concern, but presumably that also is a reflection on economic circumstances. And I think a lot of us have seen that in a lot of other contexts that advertising is down, whether it's by law firms or others. Just briefly on the expense side, the President mentioned this or alluded to this earlier. We have made some really substantial improvements to the Bar Center this year with HVAC improvements, replacements. Those are fairly expensive. A new roof, and new video conferencing. Probably the new video conferencing would be the thing that would be most visible to most of you, particularly if you have been involved in meetings in the Bar Center or in meetings in Tifton or Savannah. And it's really remarkable. I know I've been involved with some meetings in the Bar Center with Pat O'Connor in Savannah, and it's almost as if Pat were in the room. I mean, it really is really remarkable technology that we have added this year, and that's really going to benefit everyone. And if you haven't had the opportunity to use that, I hope that you will take advantage of it when you need to have a meeting. And then the last point, as I mentioned at the outset, is that we probably are looking at about a 95% budget spend this year, which is higher than we've done in the last several years. And so that's sort of where we are. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'll be happy to refer the harder questions to our CFO, Steve Lane. And as I mentioned earlier, I really want to thank Steve and his excellent staff. This will be my last budget report, last informational report as your treasurer this year, and it's been a real honor and a pleasure to serve in that role. And I'll tell you, that is probably the single role in the bar where you learn the most about the bar, because you follow where the money is, where it comes from and where it goes. And it's been a great experience working with Steve and his staff, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and be happy to answer any questions now or later as we're going through developing the budget. And when we get to the annual meeting, our incoming treasurer will be providing the proposed budget to you in June. So with that, that concludes my report, Madam President.
Madam Editfield. Madam Editfield.
Do I have, oh, here we go. Good morning. I am going to try and give you a very brief overview of what's been going on with the YLD since our meeting, our last meeting back in January. Let's see. All right, as y'all know, I had basically 3 initiatives this year: the Military Support Initiative, the Succession Planning Program Initiative, and the Professional Development Initiative. And we've done some things on all 3 since the last time we met. Some of you may remember that the VA, in order to represent a veteran on a benefits appeal, you have to be accredited. So during the mid-year meeting, we actually had about 45 young lawyers attend the VA accreditation CLE so that they can represent veterans on benefit appeals, and we're really excited about that. I know that, for instance, one of the young lawyers in Brunswick has already started taking cases on benefits for veterans, and so it's already starting to make a difference. And that's just the one person who's reached out to tell me about it. I think there are probably a lot more than that. We also are continuing to volunteer pro bono services with the legal assistance clinics around the state. I know that there was one young lawyer, there was especially a need at the Carrollton Clinic, and we've had one young lawyer step up to the plate to go over there and start pinch hitting to help do some cases over there. So we're starting to make a difference around the state as well. And of course, the Augusta Warrior Project was the recipient beneficiary of the 2015 Signature Fundraiser, and I just want to thank everybody who attended and supported us and became sponsors and bought tickets. We could not have done it without you. And I'm very excited to tell you that we raised $60,139.80 for the Augusta Warrior Project. I was just absolutely floored by the support we got from everyone, and I truly appreciate your coming and your buying tickets, your sponsoring, your offering things up for our silent auction. I was truly touched, and so is the Augusta Warrior Project. I'm going to be making a presentation to AWP at the Augusta Bar Association's Law Day program in May. So look forward to seeing Augusta lawyers then. But we also recognized Damon Elmore as the 2015 Signature Service Award recipient. I'm very excited and proud to do that. He's been a tremendous inspiration to me and a lot of others, and so there was no question that that's who needed to be recognized. So. And of course, the succession planning program, I meant to, Jack, can you hand me the blue? Oh, here we go. All right, all of you have one of these forms at your seat. Let me tell you, I've been talking to you about this throughout the year, but we actually have the form now, and it is live. And I will tell you, the succession planning program, I was sitting in the bar office, in the YLD director's office on Thursday, and someone called to let us know that they had already called to use the program, or to call Dean Powell at Mercer, because they were getting started on their succession planning. So, I just happened to be there. That was really exciting. This form, the purpose of this, we've talked a lot this morning about lawyer unemployment and underemployment. The purpose of this is to try and fix that problem, or at least alleviate that problem, when also connected with the fact that we have what Professor Averita Hansen calls the tidal gray wave, or the gray wave of baby boomers who are starting to move out of the practice of law. So if we can connect attorneys who are trying to transition into retirement with young lawyers who are looking for jobs, that's the goal of the succession planning program. It's a very simple form, and the way it works is you have one contact person, and that right now is Dean Powell at the Mercer Career Services office, and it will, if you can talk to her and tell her what you want, use this form as a guide, she can reach out. She's going to be the point of contact initially for all 5 Georgia law schools, and hopefully we will find someone who can come in and, depending on what your needs are or how you'd like to do it, take over your practice in a transition that you really have a hands-on and plan yourself. So I'm excited about that. I hope if you have any questions about it, please let me know, or please let Dean Powell, give her a call and ask her. So I'm excited about it. The form can be accessed on the website. I left the link there, but you've already got a copy of it in front of you. Take a minute and download it, and also pass it along in your circuits. If you go to your local bar associations, I hope you'll bring this up. I've publicized it in some articles, but really I think if you know people in your circuit that this would really benefit, I'd appreciate if you'd let them know about it and give them this resource. Of course, the Professional Development Initiative is another thing that I've been working on this year. We had something called the Next Step Institute back in January at the mid-year meeting. It was very successful. We had about 50 young lawyers come and attend that. We're going to be doing our second installment at the annual meeting. And we also had our Solo Small Firm Institute / Affiliates Conference. We had speakers from around the state and affiliate leaders from around the state. Of course, you know that we've got 13 affiliates, our Rome Wild, or Northwest Georgia YLD, Savannah YLD, Macon YLD. We have YLD affiliates around the state, and they were there. We had more than triple the largest number of attendees at this session than we've ever had before. So I think Jack is planning on doing that again next year. It took place in Macon, so everybody had basically the same drive, and that was the point that we tried to get across, that it doesn't matter where you live. We want you to come on a day that will come somewhere that's centrally located so everybody can come. And we had it on a Saturday, so nobody had to take off of work. And it was very successful. And also the Leadership Roundtable that we had at the spring meeting. I appreciate Joe Dent leading that. We had a great turnout for that as well. Now, the spring meeting, I'm really excited to tell you about this. I think I mentioned it in my presentation back in January. I had my spring meeting in New Orleans, and the YLD has not gone to New Orleans since 2007. That was actually my very first YLD meeting. And I was excited to bring it back. And when I started planning the meeting, I got a call from Morgan Clemens, who is our co-chair of our Minorities in the Profession Committee for the YLD. And she said, you know, we're all so excited about going to New Orleans. I'd really like to do something, you know, unique. And she had an idea for a CLE. And I connected her with Averita Hansen, with the Chief Justice's Commission on Professionalism. And we had truly one of the most unique experiences of my professional life. And that is Plessy v. Ferguson, of course, established separate but equal. And that was a case that originated in New Orleans. It was about, if you may recall, the train car. And that train car actually, that marker, I think, is where Mr. Plessy got on the train. But the pictures you see there, of course, one is the panel of all the speakers. We actually had descendants of Plessy and Ferguson come and speak to us, and they are the lady in the jacket with the white blouse. She is a descendant of Judge Ferguson, and the gentleman speaking at the microphone there is a descendant of Homer Plessy. They both live in the area, and they have created the Plessy Ferguson Foundation, and they came and spoke to us, and it's really a unique experience, and they've done a lot of great work in the city of New Orleans and are trying to bring things nationwide. So maybe we'll hear more about some of the things they're trying to do. But we also had a law school professor from Tulane and a history professor from Tulane, undergrad, come and speak to us about the history and the backdrop of the way the case originated and also the constitutional implications. And then we had a stellar presentation by Averita Hansen on professionalism. And especially since this CLE took place about a week or 2 weeks after the march at Selma, it was really a moving experience, and it's something I'm going to always treasure. And I wanted to let you know how tremendous I thought it was, and what an awesome opportunity it was for all the YLD members. And speaking of all the YLD members, this was also the largest YLD meeting we've ever had. And when I say largest YLD meeting, that's not in conjunction with the Board of Governors meeting. I was a little concerned that being out of state, we wouldn't get a great attendance. We actually had 104 people register. And we were concerned we had to actually get a hotel block at a different hotel so that we could accommodate everyone. But it was a wonderful opportunity and experience, and thanks to everyone who came and supported it. Now, lastly, I want to just bring up the legal food frenzy. You've probably received so many emails about this already, but I want to make clear that while the Young Lawyers Division is the partner with the Attorney General and the Georgia Food Bank Association, you do not have to be a young lawyer to participate. I hope that if you have not already signed up for the Legal Food Frenzy, that you will. We have, as of yesterday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, I think I got an update at that point in time from the Food Bank Association that we had 247 firms signed up. And I hope on Monday, because you can still go online and sign up through the weekend, and registration, even if it starts on Monday, April 20th, and runs through May 1st, and you can still sign up once it begins. But I would love to see all of the Board of Governors members. If you haven't already signed up, I'd love for you to participate. And I think that's all I got. Thank you so much.
Sherry and her team have been doing a phenomenal job, and all of the summary she gave you, actually at every board meeting, but this meeting as well, reflects that. And now we have the part of the agenda where we get a chance to get a feel for other folks' activities or activities that are taking place in other people's circuits. And I've asked 3 people from across the state who are members of our board to give us highlights on activities in the circuit in which they reside. Mr. Leapart, you're the first. Would you please let us know what's happening down in the Brunswick circuit? However you'd like to do it. We'd love to have 5 minutes or so, and you might use this podium if it's easier for you to rest on.
Jeff, I was hoping that at least be 4 or 5 people left here to hear our report. Patrice asked me to give a report for the bar activities on the Brunswick circuit. We got a 5-county circuit, and I'm going to report on Wayne Apple and Jeff Davis, and Jeff's going to give Glenn and Camden. We are a rather diverse, well-educated and well-traveled community in that part of Georgia. I had a case with a landowner lawyer not long ago, and I made a certain suggestion on how to address a certain issue. And he said, might be all right for you country lawyers, but, and I started to proceed. I said, now wait a damn minute. I said, I don't know where you come from, but we had a civilization down here on the Georgia coast where all the folks up around Atlanta were throwing rocks at each other. Camden has a nuclear submarine base which employs about 9,000 people. They got an express script service company there that provides health information to various policyholders for health insurance and employs about 700 people. The remainder of the economy is based on timber, and the county is now pursuing a location for a commercial space launch site. Glenn has Sea Island and St. Simons, which is a southern tourist mecca. Brunswick Pulp and Paper and Hercules, which is a chemical plant based on timber products. The Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where most of the nation's law enforcement personnel are trained. And Brunswick is also a seaport. It imports, one of the things they import is automobiles from Porsche is one of them, and a number of Japanese and other European brands. Wayne is primarily a timber and farming community with Rayonier, a specialty pulp mill used in the production of rayon, which is used in the production of tires and plastics, cigarette filters, ice cream thickeners, and triacetate used in the interior of your suits. And Appin has Plant Hatch, Georgia nuclear power plant that produces rosin from, and Lawton Chemical Plant that produces rosin from pine trees and uses an additive in the production of cellophane, paint, printing ink, and other stuff. Also, they have a large cotton gin, a commercial pump manufacturing company. And they make wood pellets, which is they ship to Europe, which they use to heat boilers with. Jeff Davis produces the same type of wood pellets, and there's a shoe manufacturing company there. It's supposed to be the second largest in the U.S. Got the largest hardwood sawmill in the U.S. And in addition to hardwood lumber, they make and support, make these carpets out of wood or hardwood mats they put in swamps and other places to run heavy equipment over. Now, neither Appin nor Jeff Davis have an active bar association. They get together once or twice a year for some sort of social function. The Jessup or Wayne County Bar Association, however, has been fairly active throughout the years. The president will meet about 6 times a year and has a membership of around 20 lawyers. The bar is presently working toward at least one meeting a month and to discuss the various issues peculiar to our local bar. We support a local mock trial team. It has a team for relay of life and has an annual Christmas party. We give annually $1,500 cash to a graduating senior based on his or her academic status and activities. No strings attached. They can use it for education, anything they want to use it for. The main thing we want one of these kids to do is get some life experience that will make a change in his attitude or maybe help him along his way. And some of the meetings, we have speakers on various legal issues. We're presently reestablishing the law library in the courthouse. We had one in the local library, but the library was needed the space for something else, and so we moved. The Jessup Bar, we also, it's a small community, you can't do it probably in a large, something like Atlanta, but we have a policy of sending flowers to funerals for family members. And the secretary of the bar handles it, and we just take up a collection every now and then to pay for it. That pretty well concludes my presentation, so I'm gonna ask Jeff to tell you about the Camden Bar and the Brunswick Bar.
Thank you, Alvin. Just briefly, with regard to the Camden Bar Association, it's my understanding that those folks get together once a month to have lunch on a Friday, and they talk about the local issues that they may have. They may have a speaker every now and again, maybe not. They participate in the legal food frenzy, as well as they also give out a college scholarship to a local recipient every year. With regard to Glenn County, over the last couple of years, our Younger Lawyers Division has become much more active than we had seen in quite a while. They hosted a cocktail mixer before the Jekyll Island Board of Governors meeting. Some of the folks in the room participated in that. And more recently, within the last couple of weeks, they hosted a charity golf tournament and were able to raise almost $1,000 that went to the Davis Love Foundation, which contributes money to local charities in Glenn County, as well as the Program for Court-Appointed Special Advocates. With regard to the Bar Association itself in Glenn County, we typically try to meet on a quarterly basis and have an annual Christmas party, and when we do meet, we try to have speakers. Recent speakers have included Judge Michael Boggs from the Court of Appeals, Judge Lisa Godby Wood, as well as local Superior Court Judge Stephen Kelly. Law Day has become a big deal in Glenn County, and in fact, last year our bar was recognized by this board for its activities. And last year, the speaker was the now American Bar Association President William Hubbard, and we've had the privilege of listening to the Task Force on Human Trafficking from United States Attorney's Office in Savannah as well. I believe that concludes the report on Glenn and Camden. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for letting us know what's happening down there. Thank you, Ms. Leapart. All right, we have Joy Parks. She's going to tell us what's happening right around where we are right now. We are in Anoka County, right?
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you all for coming. This is the Anoka Judicial Circuit that you're in, and that is a Cherokee word that means bald or bear, so we're not exactly sure how they linked that up to rename that, but the Anoka Judicial Circuit was formed in 1992, and it's composed of Lumpkin towns, Union, and White counties. You would have came through either Lumpkin or White County if you came from the south up to Towns County here. And it was carved off of the Northern Circuit and also the Northeastern Circuit and also the Mountain Circuit. This is a map, of course, of the state, and you'll see the orange at the top, and that is the four counties that compose the Anoka Judicial Circuit. It does not show the topography, so you'll know that you either had to come over Unicoi Gap, Hogpen Gap, or Neals Gap to get here. So that is really a barrier to a lot of the attorneys that practice that cover all the counties in this circuit. Lumpkin County is, again, the county seat is Dahlonega. The population there is approximately 30,000 with 56 active attorneys. That was their new courthouse they just built probably 5 years ago. Towns County, where you are now, Hiawassee is the county seat, then Young Harris is the county where we are, the city where we are. Population 10,000, and of those probably the majority are retired citizens as well, and there's 36 active attorneys there. We say active, they're showing active, I think, with the bar. Whether they have a practice or not, that is not generally going to be the case. There's very few ones that actually have an everyday practice. Union County, Blairsville, such as Blairsville is the county seat. The population is approximately 20,000, and then there's 46 active attorneys there. And then White County, which is my county, Cleveland's the county seat. You also have Helen. The population is 27,000. They are approximately, and I think it blooms to about 50,000 during October when you have Oktoberfest going on there. So, and it says 36 active attorneys. Again, there's a lot of retirees there. There's probably between 10 and 15 that actually have an everyday practice there. The biggest thing that we are proud of in our circuit are the accountability courts. Right now, just as of January 2015, is the first time we've ever had over 100 participants in our accountability courts. Our oldest one started back in 2003, and that was the Anoka Drug Court South, and that covered Lumpkin and White counties. And Currently, there are 178 graduates from that and 59 current participants. As of this year, the graduation rate is 75%, so we're very proud of that. And also, the recidivism rate is so low, and since June of 2013, only 4 of the previous participants have been rearrested. Because of the need, of course, for the drug court, we have started in 2013 the North Drug Court, and that includes Towns and Union counties. And the biggest thing that they're accolading of theirs is there are 36 current participants, and of those 36, they are all employed. And that, if you're aware of drug courts and how that works, that is a major impediment a lot of times to their success, is being able to find employment. They were looking at how the drugs are distributed as far as what ones they're dealing with most, and there still is over 50% of the drugs they're dealing with on a regular basis are methamphetamine. But there are, I think it varies to about 6 different drugs at this point. We have the Anoda Mental Health Court and the VA Court, which started in 2012, and this program, there's 76 have been accepted into this program as of this year. This is a program that's taken a little bit longer to get off the floor, but we're seeing lots of success with it. There have been 27 graduations. 13 of those were employed at graduation, and then I think another 14 of those were actually on disability. So there was just a couple in there that were not able to be employed or otherwise have an income when they graduated. In 2008, the juvenile court instituted the Family Treatment Court, and this was a court that was targeting parents who had children who were in defects custody, or else they were in the possibility of going into defects custody because of substance abuse issues. And this has been very successful. Right now, there are currently 13 participants, but within the last 6 months, we've seen that the 10 different families have been reunited because of this, and so this treatment program is really working. This also deals with the juveniles who are involved in it too. It provides counseling and those type things to them, so if there's any issues they have, they try to address those. And then another accountability court that we just started in 2013 is the Parent Accountability Court, and we call it the Child Support Court, but it deals with child support, and it tries to just help the participants be able to get employed and to be able to meet those goals where they can comply with the orders of the courts. And again, right now there's currently 23 participants, and of those 20 are employed, and so that's showing lots of success with that accountability court. Talking about all these accountability courts, now I want to just say we welcome you to this area, and there's lots going on here. And talking mock trial team is Union County, and they are the region champions 6 of the last 7 years, and so that's a big thing that our bar participates in. We are relatively active. We try to have meetings once a month for the whole bar. That doesn't really, generally you have some on the south side and some on the north side. And so it doesn't really work. Generally, the Christmas party is when we all get together as a bar for everybody. This is one of the big things in our area. We are now a prominent area as far as wine growing, and so we've talked about all the accountability courts, and I encourage you to drink responsibly. But while you're here, we would like for you to partake in some of there's like the Georgia Wine Highways. I think there's 30 wineries in the state of Georgia, and then the majority of those are in our circuit here. There's 7 in White County, 4 in Lumpkin County, and I'm not sure the number in Towns and Union, but the majority of those wineries are located in this 4-county region. And this gives you, and you actually can't see the websites, but encourage you just to look that up, or while you're here, just stop in a couple of the wineries before you head back to your locales. And also just some other activities there. You would probably pass the Indian Mound. There's lots of hiking, those type things. And then it's not too late to enjoy the sunrise from Brasstown Bald in the morning, the highest point in Georgia. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy, for giving us a feel for your area. And I think, Walter, you're going to do this, or Chris is going to do the presentation, okay, for the Northern Surfing. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the court and the bar, I'm thankful for this opportunity to speak to you. I am nearing the start of my 40th year as a member of the bar of the Northern Judicial Circuit. And I can tell you without hesitation, it's been a great blessing for me to practice in my rural hometown of Hartwell. Some of you know I graduated from Emory with our fellow members on the Board of Governors, Terry Miller and Todd Carroll and others. Then I went on to Antioch Law School in Washington, D.C., which was the nation's first clinical law school, the first law school that required a substantial clinical practice in order to graduate. And following that, and by the way, that school no longer exists. When you have a school that is committed to the training of practicing lawyers with the goal of representing indigent people, you don't create a lot of wealthy alumni who can then contribute to the school. But having returned home to practice nearly, well, now 39 years ago, I just want to express my appreciation to the president for this incubator program. I would have given anything had I had the training that this program seems like it may provide. And you know, with all due respect to my colleague of Cobb County, when you begin your practice as a law school graduate in a town with 5 other lawyers, you don't find a lot of lawyers who are willing to help you out and who are willing to train you or mentor you. In fact, you find that the other lawyers are very competitive about the expenditure of every single dollar for legal services. And you don't find the collegiality or the cooperation that you might find in the larger areas. I also take some issue with another gentleman from Cobb County in terms of a percentage of practice. Not necessarily on purpose, but I have found that an analysis of my time records over the last 9 years show that I have expended between 35% and 40% of my professional hours in service to indigent and low-paying individuals. I know that it can be done, and I would hope that there might be a requirement of that program, that the graduates of that program be required, in addition to service to the poor, that they be required to, at least some of them be required to come to rural areas and not focus on the metro areas alone, because we've got problems in the rural areas just like you do in the metro areas. And I would also ask that there be some consideration of a requirement that that training then be extended by them to others, so that the program can grow outside of the boundaries of that program should it be adopted. Now, our bar is not quite as active as the Atlanta Bar, and certainly not as active as the number of many bar associations in the District of Columbia. And in thinking about making these remarks, I looked around my office for inspiration. I've got this large bookcase cabinet behind my desk that was custom built by a cabinet maker who had far more skills than he had cash. And that's one of the things you learn as a rural lawyer is to barter your services. But there in my bookcase is a book that I cherish. It's a leather-bound book that was given to my first cousin, Marion Gordon, who for many years was the most senior of the senior assistant attorney generals in the state of Georgia. And Marion, when Arthur Bolton retired, Marion was given this book by him. It's a nice leather-bound book with a gold leaf title on the spine and the front that says, "My Knowledge of Georgia Politics" by Marion O. Gordon. That was given to me when Marion died. So with a great deal of interest, I picked up the book to immerse myself in that knowledge and found that every page was blank. And thus I think of the activities of the Northern Judicial Bar Association. Now, when Judge Phelps and I both became members of that bar in 1976, and we both went back to our hometowns, he in Elberton and I in Hartwell, we became members of the Northern Judicial Circuit Bar, and we had quarterly meetings, and we had some pretty rip-snorting meetings with some lions of the bar like Andrew J. Hill and the erudite Freeman Leverett and the ever-bellicose William Oscar Carter, all fueled by the ample amounts of whiskey that the bar provided at its meetings. And when I began the leadership path in our circuit bar, treasurer, secretary, and so forth, I learned that the most important job in our local bar association was that of treasurer, because not only did you account for the relatively limited dues that were paid, your job was to account for the bar's bar. Your job was to carry the bar's bar around in the trunk of your car to the meetings and then to safeguard it at your office in between the meetings. And believe me, it took a trustworthy person to be the treasurer. And that perhaps is why it was the most important office in our local bar. You then had to at the end of your term, of course, you were expected to turn over the bar's bar to the next hapless soul who had that office. And typically the job became much easier through the year because the bar would shrink as you went through the year. And at the time you turned it over to your successor, it was usually just the few bottles of rot gut that somebody had bought 10 years ago that nobody wanted. You know, I've had a good time as a member of that bar. We have had some notable activities in the Elberton Bar. All of those are now in the past. Chris and I have found in talking about it that one of the sad facts is that new lawyers seem to be much more focused on their own practice and their firms and less focused on service to the community and the bar. And I applaud every one of you that provides service in that fashion, because it is something that we are all called upon to do. Now, that said, it's my pleasure to turn this over now to Chris Phelps. As you know, Chris is a longtime Board of Governors member. He is a longtime member of the Budget Committee, the Executive Committee, and I understand he is affectionately known as Old Tightwad in some of those activities. But let me introduce him as one of the oldest members of our bar, but also our newest Superior Court judge, Judge Chris Phelps.
Well, thank you. There's so many youngsters here. I don't know if any of you ever heard of Duffy Daugherty, the former great Michigan State football coach. And other than Pat and me, I don't know if many of you even remember Bear Bryant. But Duffy Daugherty once said of Bear Bryant, he told him, said, "You know, you're not the best football coach in the world, but I'll be damned if you don't cause the most commotion." And maybe that'll be my legacy. But I just want to briefly mention the Northern Circuit is comprised of 5 counties: Elbert, Hart, Franklin, Madison, and Oglethorpe. We're the northeasternmost corner of Georgia. 3 of those counties border on the South Carolina line: Elbert, Hart, and Franklin. It's a unique makeup because all of the counties, we all have a county seat. In fact, Elbert County has Elberton and Bowman, and never the twain shall meet, because Bowman is still mad because they were not selected to be the county seat of Elbert County. So that's the way it is, and it's like that in all the counties. They're all different communities, very diverse, and we have one of the smallest circuit bar associations in the state. As Walter said, he chose some 40 years ago to go back home. He could have gone elsewhere. Probably knowing Walter as long as I have since high school, he could have named his place. I chose to go back home. Our homes have been good to us, made us a good living. And that's one of the points that I wanted to make today. The incubator program is an interesting concept. But when I started practicing law in Elberton 39 years ago, there were 22 lawyers there in private practice. With my now no longer being in private practice, there are 6. All the counties of our circuit, really with the exception of Hart, have the same situation. In Elbert County, none of those lawyers in private practice are under 45 years of age. A good friend of mine there in private practice when he was 66 years old, his son graduated from law school, said he was going to come back and practice law with his father. Dream come true. Father spent a bunch of money, renovated the office, gutted it, built it back out. A year later, the son walks in and says, "Dad, this isn't for me. I'm going to Atlanta." So my point is this: when we talk about the administrative or the lack of legal services available to the underprivileged or the poor, there's another component to that. And that is the fact that graduating law students have no interest in locating to rural areas, or for that matter, practicing law like Walter Gordon and I have practiced law for the last 39 years. The last law student I talked to when I desperately needed to hire somebody about 2 years ago wanted a fixed salary, a 401k, health insurance benefits, and this blew my mind, a signing bonus. And I don't know if that's what they're teaching them coming out of law school or not, but this is a big problem in rural areas in terms of the dispensation of legal services to people. And I would leave you with this thought. As we consider the incubator program, we need to consider the fact that yeah, we may have 5 counties that have no lawyer. But when you consider that Elbert County 39 years ago had 22, and now we have 6, and none of them are under 45 years of age, we have issues that we need to address, and that is a component of anything. So thank you for listening to me. We have a wonderful circuit, so we'd love to have y'all come visit us sometime. As Walter told me last night, he said, "You know, we got 11 lawyers in Hartwell now." I said, "Man, Walter, y'all grown." He said, "Yeah, but you know, we have more retired lawyers from Atlanta living on the beautiful Lake Hartwell shoreline than we do practicing in Hartwell." And I don't know what kind of commentary that says, but as you consider everything, don't forget those of us who scratch out a living in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Gordon and Judge Phelps. I hope that you all got a feel for where we are, and as we have done these throughout the state, that you get a feeling of what it's like to practice law in other places than maybe where you reside. So I appreciate your patience with this, and I also appreciate your cooperation in let's moving the agenda forward so we can get time for this, because it's important. It's important to us to know what's going on out there. The written reports are provided for your information under tab 6. I do want to call out a couple of things, just point to your attention. The communications report, we have 5 pages of single-space, small print coverage. That is a testament of itself when you can show and demonstrate what's been happening in communications. Old is in 7, item 7, any old business? Oh, you got one?
I want to remind everybody, if you haven't signed the roll, please see me and we'll get you to sign the roll. And I just want to say on behalf, personally, as a member of the executive committee, you know, in Georgia, we know the rule is you get to have a thorough and sifting cross-examination. Well, today we had a thorough and sifting debate, and frankly, that's good. And I appreciate you all giving us input so that we as leaders of the bar can consider your questions. Thank you very much.
Any other old business? Any new business? Questions, answers, comments? Oh, wait a minute. Who stood up first? Tina, come on. You're first, and I'll get to Dane.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Raises comes about because of the incubator program and the meeting that we had Wednesday. For those of you who don't know, I'm a member of the Atlanta delegation, And the Wednesday before any of these meetings, we have a meeting of our delegation. We go through the agenda and we debate and discuss the issues. And several times during that meeting, Patrice, you made very clear that the issue of the incubator program did not need to come under our policies and rules to the board for discussion, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so that, I wanted my fellow board members to understand that the issues that we debated today, and I appreciate the debate, did not need to come before us, according to Patrice and the executive committee, I assume. That it could have been decided, it could have been decided in the Bar Center Committee meeting on its own, or did it have to be decided by the
No, it
executive?
has to go from the Bar Center to the executive committee. The committee brings it to the executive committee. The executive committee has approval.
And it just seems to me, and it's what we have here, which is spending almost $500,000 on a novel program, that is something that should have come to the Board of Governors. And I would like to raise to Mr. Kaufman, going into his year, to consider policies where the board wouldn't be involved in these decisions, as opposed to the executive committee only making these decisions.
All right. You had a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam President, I didn't rise a while ago to oppose the incubator program.
Well, I wasn't.
But it seems as though this is never said, or either nobody's aware of it. And I want to make a point here where everybody is locked in. Of course, you can walk out, but I want everybody to hear this. Our legal aid program in Georgia, as a practical matter, in the rural areas, is of none effect. Okay? I said of none effect. It is non-existent. Okay? Let me give you my example. I had the office in Valdosta, which was closed some years ago, covered our area when they would take the cases. But now it's moved to Albany. That's 70 miles from our closest county seat. It's 106 miles to 10 miles from the furthest county seat. Now, tell me, if you're already indigent, how you going to travel a minimum of 140 miles round trip to see your lawyer? Or how you going to travel a minimum of 212 miles round trip to see your lawyer? And if you're on the other end of Clinch County, which is on the Florida line, that's another 30 miles. It's actually 260 miles round trip. It's as far as it took me to come up here to this meeting just to go see your lawyer in Albany, Georgia, if they'll take your case. Now, notwithstanding what you said about the federal mandates, the indigent people call my office trying to ask me to appoint them an attorney. Of course, you know how that goes, can't do that. So I refer them to the legal aid office in Albany. Well, they've already called Albany. They can't take the case, not because of salary discrepancies, but because they're overwhelmed. They cannot take any more cases. They don't get into the case. They don't get that far to get into salaries. They're overwhelmed. They can't take the case. They won't even talk to them any further on the phone. Now, I'm not trying to throw Phyllis under the bus. I think she does the best job she can do with what she's got to work with. But here's my point. If the state bar is truly interested, not lip service, if the state bar is truly interested in helping the indigent people, the public in our state, then the fields are truly ripe for harvest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comment. Those type of comments led to that Rural Lawyer Assistance Program. I agree. Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
Buck, are you going to talk about the incubator or something else?
I was just going to say one thing.
Okay, go ahead. I yield the
In response
buck.
to what Tina said, and that is that the incubator program was brought to the executive committee for a vote, but the executive committee voted to bring it to the Board of Governors. So the executive committee would not take action on it, and it was referred to the board to be voted on. So, I mean, that's not even an issue, and I just wanted you to be aware of that.
On hopefully a closing positive note, those of you who don't know me, I'm Lester Johnson from Savannah, And even though at one time in far, far history, the annual meeting was held in Savannah every year, Savannahans have always had a very difficult time dealing with the concept of the State Bar of Georgia. And I rise because of 3 recent social events that I attended. We have a very lovely Savannah Music Festival. If you've never been there, you ought to come. And we go to these festivals, and it covers every genre of music you can think of. We happen to have been at the Wailers, which is, those who don't know, is Bob Marley's group, backup group. And so if you like reggae, we were having a good time. And then they always have a reception. Savannahans never have an event without a reception. So at that reception, 2 people came to me and asked me what I did. I told them I was an attorney. And they said, well, we are very impressed with the fact that your bar president has been writing articles, apparently, that get published in the morning news. We only have 1 publication in Savannah. And they're lovely articles, and they talk about lawyers, and they talk about things that are associated with lawyers. Went to another event that was a little more sophisticated musical genre. And again, at each event, you have different levels of folks. So at the Wailers, we had a lot of young people. At this event, we had a lot of senior citizens. Again, someone came up, I announced to them I was a lawyer. They too acknowledged the articles that had been written. What I'm here to do is to say thank you, because Savannahans or lay people don't get the Daily Report. They don't even know about it. When we talk about articles that affect lawyers in Savannah, and we say, well, they say, well, where did you hear that? We say, oh, the Daily Report. And they look at us like we're aliens. The Daily Report, what is that? So, Patrice, thank you for allowing those lawyers in Savannah who have had to defend the State Bar to now be proud of the fact that people in Savannah know that things happen, good things happen to lawyers, and they read about it in our morning news. Bob, I would ask you and Rita, please continue that. It has helped out tremendously. We get more yardage out of that, Patrice, than we've ever gotten, even when we did have the State Bar in Savannah every year. Thank you.
Thank you. I needed to just let you know a date. This Tuesday, we're going to be celebrating Law Day again, and it's about the Magna Carta. And we had a wonderful Magna Carta presentation at the State Bar Symposium that was, where's Ken? Ken's implementation as chair, Buck's suggestion to form a committee for my year. I loved it. And I followed through on its, the execution. We celebrated the 800th year of the Magna Carta, and several of you are members of that committee. But this Tuesday, the actual Law Day program will focus on young people being exposed to the Magna Carta at the Bar Center. We're expecting about 300 young people from various schools to come and hear the program. Any other business we bring before the board? If not, we are in adjournment.